Greg Coleman stands before the pack-led council, his heart racing as he presents his archaeological findings. The alien faces stare back at him, their expressions a mix of disdain and mockery. He's determined to prove the value of human archaeology, but with each passing moment, his confidence wanes. Zara, the female pack-led council leader, interrupts his presentation. Primitive methods, worthless conclusions. Human archaeology is a joke, she declares, her words cutting through the air like a knife. The chamber erupts in laughter. Greg's cheeks burn with humiliation, but a fire ignites within him. He won't let this be the end. With a steady voice, he addresses the council. I request permission to explore the restricted area of Zephyria. The rumors of ancient ruins. Zara cuts him off with a dismissive wave. Go ahead, human. Waste your time. We'll enjoy watching you fail. The council grants approval, their smirks revealing their expectation of his imminent failure. Greg gathers his equipment, determination fueling his every move. He sets out into Zephyria's treacherous outlands, the alien landscape stretching before him. Days pass as Greg navigates harsh terrain. The sun beats down mercilessly, and nights bring bone-chilling cold. He presses on, driven by the desire to prove himself and uncover the planet's secrets. On the 5th day, Greg spots an opening in a rocky cliff face. His heart leaps as he approaches, realizing it's the entrance to a vast cave system. He activates his advanced scanning technology, detecting faint energy signatures deep within. Greg enters the caves, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. He navigates carefully, avoiding unstable passages and ancient traps. The air grows thick with anticipation as he descends deeper into the planet's core. Hours pass before Greg emerges into a massive chamber. His breath catches in his throat. Intricate crystalline structures rise from the floor, their surfaces gleaming in the light of his helmet lamp. Mysterious artifacts line the walls, their purpose unknown, but their significance undeniable. In the center of the chamber, a hidden control panel catches Greg's eye. His hands tremble as he activates it, triggering a holographic display that illuminates the cavern. The hologram reveals the existence of an ancient, highly advanced civilization predating the pack-led. Greg's eyes widen as he absorbs the information. Revolutionary technological concepts, vast stores of scientific and cultural knowledge, it's all here. The implications are staggering. This discovery could shift the balance of power between humans and aliens in the galaxy. As Greg begins documenting his findings, his communicator crackles to life. It's an urgent message from the human embassy on Zephyria. The pack-led council, suspecting his success, has dispatched a team to confiscate any discoveries and permanently exclude humans from further exploration. Greg's heart races. He must secure evidence of his discovery and transmit it off-world before the pack-led team arrives. The race against time begins, with the fate of human scientific endeavors hanging in the balance. In this forgotten cave, amidst the ancient beauty of a long-lost civilization, Greg Coleman prepares to change the course of galactic history, if only he can outmaneuver those who once mocked him. Greg's fingers flew over the control panel, his mind racing as he absorbed the revolutionary information before him. The holographic display pulsed with ancient knowledge, each passing second revealing more about the long-lost civilization that once thrived on Zephyria. As he worked to document his findings, the sudden crackle of his communicator shattered his concentration. The urgent message from the human embassy sent a jolt of adrenaline through his system. The pack-led council, once dismissive of his efforts, now saw him as a threat. Greg's eyes darted around the chamber, taking in the crystalline structures and mysterious artifacts. He couldn't let this discovery slip through his fingers. With practiced efficiency, he activated his wrist-mounted data recorder, capturing high-resolution scans of the alien control panel and surrounding area. As the recorder worked, a glint caught his eye. Near the control panel lay a small, crystal-like device. Greg's archaeological instincts kicked in, recognizing its potential importance. With careful movements, he retrieved the object and secured it in his pack. Time was running short. Greg began his ascent through the cave system, his footsteps echoing off the ancient walls. The path that had taken hours to navigate on the way down now became a treacherous race against the clock. Loose rocks skittered beneath his feet, as he pushed himself to move faster. Narrow passages that had once required careful maneuvering now became obstacles to be overcome with calculated risks. Greg squeezed through tight spaces, ignoring the scrapes and bruises that accumulated on his body. His breath came in ragged gasps, the weight of his discovery pushing him forward. As he neared the surface, his sensors began to ping with increasing frequency. The pack-led team was closing in, their energy signatures growing stronger with each passing moment. Greg's heart pounded in his chest as he emerged from the cave entrance, blinking in the harsh Zephyrian sunlight. Without hesitation, he broke into a sprint across the rugged landscape. His knowledge of the terrain, hard-won over days of exploration, guided him along the quickest route back to his research outpost. The pack on his back seemed to grow heavier with each step, the crystal device a constant reminder of what was at stake. Cresting a hill, Greg's blood ran cold. In the distance, a pack-led shuttle touched down, its sleek form a stark contrast to the wild Zephyrian landscape. As he watched, a team of armed guards emerged, led by a familiar figure. Zara, the council leader who had mocked him earlier, strode purposefully across the terrain. Greg's mind raced, calculating distances and possibilities. There was no way he could reach his outpost before the pack-led team intercepted him. He needed a new plan. His eyes scanned the horizon, landing on a dense patch of alien flora in the near distance. A memory surfaced. These plants were known for their signal-dampening properties. Changing course, Greg plunged into the thick vegetation. The leaves brushed against his skin as he pushed through, their unique chemical composition already beginning to interfere with his equipment. Once he felt sufficiently hidden, Greg activated his emergency beacon, sending out a distress signal to the human embassy. With trembling hands, he began the process of transmitting his data through a secure, encrypted channel. The dense foliage slowed the transmission to a crawl, forcing Greg to remain stationary. He crouched low, every rustle of leaves sending a spike of fear through him. As the data inched its way through the airwaves, the sounds of the pack-led search team grew closer. Their unfamiliarity with the terrain bought Greg precious seconds, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. The transmission was barely halfway complete when he heard Zara's voice, unnervingly close. "Spread out! The human couldn't have gone far! Find him!" Greg's mind raced. He couldn't abandon the transmission now, not when he was so close, but staying put meant certain capture. His hand brushed against his pack, and inspiration struck. The crystal device from the cave. Could it be more than just an artifact? With careful movements, Greg connected the device to his transmitter. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, as if by magic, the transmission speed surged. Data that would have taken hours to send now flowed freely, the crystal amplifying the signal beyond anything Greg had seen before. He watched in awe as the upload bar filled rapidly, reaching completion just as the sound of footsteps approached his hiding spot. Greg disconnected the crystal device and tucked it safely away, preparing to make a run for it. As he turned to flee, Greg found himself face-to-face with Zara. Her weapon was trained on his chest, her eyes cold and calculating. Behind her, the pack-led search team closed in, cutting off any chance of escape. "Well, well," Zara said, her voice dripping with disdain. "It seems our little human archaeologist has been busy. Hand over your findings, Greg. Now." Greg's mind raced, acutely aware of the crystal device in his pack and the uncertain fate of his transmission. He had come too far to give up now. With the weight of his discovery pressing down on him, Greg prepared to face whatever came next, knowing that the next few moments could change the course of human history in the galaxy. Greg's heart pounded as he stared into Zara's cold eyes, her weapon trained on his chest. In that moment, he made a split-second decision. Without warning, he dropped to the ground, using the dense Zephyrian flora as cover. The sudden movement caught Zara off guard. "Seize him!" she barked, but Greg was already in motion. He rolled away from her line of fire, leaves and twigs scratching his face as he tumbled through the underbrush. In one fluid motion, he reached into his pack and grasped the crystal device. With a practiced flick of his wrist, he tossed it into a nearby patch of bioluminescent plants. The crystal landed softly, its faint glow camouflaged by the natural luminescence of the alien flora. Greg allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before reality crashed back in. Stop right there, human! Zara's voice rang out closer now. Greg raised his hand slowly, knowing his brief moment of defiance was at an end. The pack-led team quickly surrounded him, their weapons humming with energy. "On your feet," one of the guards growled, roughly hauling Greg up. As they began to search him, Greg's mind raced. Had the data transmission been successful? Would anyone find the hidden crystal? Zara approached, her face twisted with frustration. "Search the area thoroughly. He must have hidden something." Greg watched as the pack-led team spread out, their scanning devices sweeping the vegetation. To his relief, the signal-dampening properties of the plants seemed to interfere with their equipment. The guards' expressions grew increasingly confused as they failed to detect anything of significance. "Ma'am, our scanners are malfunctioning," one of the guards reported. "The local flora is interfering with the readings." Zara's eyes narrowed as she studied Greg's face. "No matter. We have what we came for. Bring him to the shuttle." As they marched him towards the waiting vessel, Greg caught snippets of Zara's communication with the pack-led council. "Yes, counselor, we have the human in custody, but no, we haven't found any artifacts. It appears his expedition was a failure after all." A wave of relief washed over Greg. His gamble had paid off. The data was safe, transmitted off-world before his capture. The journey to the pack-led detention facility was a blur of alien landscapes and tense silence. Greg found himself in a stark, metallic room, facing a team of grim-faced interrogators. "Tell us about the cave system, human," one of them demanded. "What did you find?" Greg schooled his features into a mask of disappointment. "Nothing," he said, his voice tinged with genuine frustration over the lost crystal. "I found some interesting rock formations, but nothing of real value. You can check my equipment if you don't believe me." Hours passed as the questioning continued. Greg maintained his story, his archaeological training, allowing him to discuss the expedition in great detail while revealing nothing of true importance. As exhaustion began to set in, a commotion outside the interrogation room caught everyone's attention. The door slid open, revealing a tall, distinguished human man in diplomatic attire. "I am Ambassador Marcus Steele of the Earth Embassy," he announced, his voice carrying authority. "I'm here to secure the release of Greg Coleman." The pack-led interrogators exchanged uneasy glances. One of them activated a communication device, speaking rapidly in their native language. Greg felt a glimmer of hope, but he knew the situation was far from dedication. As the diplomats argued outside, he caught a glimpse of another new arrival, a woman with sharp eyes and an air of academic intensity. She studied him briefly before turning to confer with Ambassador Steele. Meanwhile, back in the Zephyrian wilderness, Zara stood at the site of Greg's capture. Her suspicions had grown since the interrogation began. Something about the human's demeanor didn't sit right with her. "Bring the bioelectric sensors," she ordered. "If there's anything hidden in this vegetation, we'll find it." As night fell on Zephyria, the search team methodically combed through the area. The bioluminescent plants glowed softly, their light reflecting off the advanced equipment in the pack-led's hands. In the detention facility, Greg sat in his cell, unaware of the forces converging around his discovery. He closed his eyes, picturing the hidden crystal and the secrets it might contain. Whatever happened next, he knew the galaxy would never be the same. The bioelectric sensors beeped softly as they passed over a patch of glowing plants. Zara's eyes lit up with anticipation. "Dig here," she commanded. "Carefully." As her team began to excavate, the faint outline of a crystal began to emerge from the Zephyrian soil. Zara reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as they neared the ancient artifact. The search for the truth about Zephyria's past, and perhaps the future of galactic power, was about to enter a new phase. Just as her fingers brushed against the cool surface of the crystal, a low rumble shook the ground beneath her feet. "What was that?" one of the guards asked, his voice tinged with alarm. Zara's eyes narrowed as she carefully lifted the crystal from its earthy cradle. "Seismic activity on Zephyria?" She turned to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Kraz. "This is highly unusual. We need to report this to the Council immediately." As the first rays of dawn painted the Zephyrian sky in hues of purple and orange, Kraz activated his communication device. "Council, this is Lieutenant Kraz. We've recovered an artifact of significant interest and detected unexpected seismic activity, requesting immediate guidance. While Zara and her team grappled with their discovery, activity at the human embassy had reached a fever pitch. Ambassador Marcus Steele paced the length of his office, his normally composed demeanor replaced by scarcely controlled urgency. "You're certain about this?" he asked, his voice taut as he addressed the holographic projection of Earth's Interstellar Relations Committee. The stern-faced committee member nodded. "Absolutely, Ambassador. The data Dr. Coleman transmitted is groundbreaking. We're authorizing you to use any means necessary to secure his release and retrieve the artifact. The implications for galactic politics are immeasurable." Steele's mind raced, weighing options and calculating risks. As the transmission ended, he turned to his aide. "Get me Commander Harper. Now." Across the embassy complex, in a dimly lit laboratory, Dr. Alara Voss hunched over a console, her eyes bloodshot from hours of intense concentration. Lines of alien code scrolled across her screen, slowly yielding their secrets to her relentless analysis. Suddenly, she sat bolt upright. "No, it can't be," she whispered, her fingers flying across the keypad to double-check her findings. The implications were staggering. The crystal wasn't just a data storage device. It was a key to something far greater. Without a second thought, Voss grabbed her field kit and rushed out of the lab. She had to see for herself, to confirm her theories in person. The risks were high, but the potential payoff was beyond imagination. As the embassy buzzed with activity, a very different scene unfolded in the sterile confines of the Packlet detention facility. Greg Coleman sat on the edge of his bunk, every muscle in his body tense as he strained to make sense of the fragments of conversation drifting through his cell door. Crystal, ancient tech, council meeting. His heart raced. They had found it. But how much did they know? Greg's mind whirled with possibilities and dangers. He needed to act, and fast. Studying the layout of his cell for the 100th time, Greg's gaze fell on the ventilation grate near the ceiling. It was small, almost too small, but it might just be his only chance. He began to formulate a plan, knowing that timing would be everything. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface of Zephyria, ancient systems stirred to life. Dormant for millennia, the vast network of precursor technology began to awaken, triggered by the removal of the crystal key. Energy pulses rippled through subterranean chambers, causing the planet to shudder and shift. On the surface, these tremors manifested as a series of small but noticeable quakes. In the pack-led council chambers, heated debate gave way to confusion and concern as the floor trembled beneath their feet. "What is happening to our world?" demanded one council member, his voice rising in pitch. General Dorn, his face a mask of unyielding commitment, seized the moment. "This is clearly the result of human interference. We must act now to secure our planet and expel these interlopers before it's too late." As arguments erupted across the chamber, a junior aide burst through the doors. "Counselors, we've received an urgent report from Lieutenant Kraz. They've found something." In the pre-dawn light, Commander Jack Harper and his team of Earth Special Forces operatives moved like shadows through the dense Zephyrian fog. Their advanced stealth suits rendered them nearly invisible as they approached the Packlet detention facility. Harper's voice crackled over the secure comm channel. "Remember, team, this is a precision operation. We get Coleman out fast and clean. No unnecessary engagement." As they neared the facility's perimeter, Harper felt a slight tremor beneath his feet. He frowned, tapping his wrist computer to scan for seismic activity. The readings made no sense. Zephyria was supposed to be tectonically stable. "Stay alert, people," he whispered. "Something's not right here." Inside the facility, Greg Coleman had made his move. Using a makeshift tool fashioned from his meal tray, he had managed to loosen the ventilation grate. Just as he prepared to hoist himself up, another tremor shook the building. Alarms began to blare, and he could hear the sound of guards rushing past his cell. Greg hesitated for a split second, then made his decision. It was now or never. With a grunt of effort, he pulled himself into the narrow ventilation shaft, praying that his gamble would pay off. As chaos erupted across Zephyria, Dr. Voss guided her small research vessel toward the coordinates she had extrapolated from Greg's data. The ship's sensors pinged, alerting her to yet another seismic event. "Computer, analyze these tremors," she commanded, her eyes fixed on the approaching landmass. "Analysis complete," the AI responded. "Seismic activity is consistent with deep subterranean energy discharges. Source unknown." Voss's heart raced. Could this be evidence of the precursor network coming back online? She pushed the throttle forward, more determined than ever to reach her destination. As dawn broke fully over Zephyria, the planet seemed to hold its breath. In the detention facility, the embassy, the Pakled council chambers, and deep within the awakening precursor network, forces were aligning for a confrontation that would shape the future of not just this world, but potentially the entire galaxy. Greg Coleman, clinging to hope as he navigated the cramped ventilation system, had no way of knowing that his discovery had set in motion events far beyond his wildest imagination. As another tremor shook the facility, he pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that everything now hinged on what happened in the next few hours. Hours would be crucial. As Greg steeled himself for the challenges ahead, he had no idea how quickly events were about to unfold. The first hints of dawn were just beginning to paint the sky when Commander Jack Harper and his extraction team approached the Pakled detention facility. The dense fog that blanketed the area provided additional cover for their already impressive stealth technology. Harper, a man whose weathered face spoke of countless covert operations, signaled his team to halt at the edge of the facility's outer perimeter. "All right, people," he whispered into his comm. "We've got a narrow window here. Let's make it count." With practiced precision, the team bypassed the outer security measures, their advanced equipment rendering them virtually invisible to Pakled sensors. They moved silently towards a weak point in the facility's defenses, identified through meticulous intelligence gathering by the human embassy. Inside the facility, Greg Coleman was putting his own plan into motion. He had spent hours observing the guards, noting their routines and behaviors. Now, as his morning meal arrived, he saw his chance. Greg took a small bite of the food, then began to gasp and claw at his throat. He fell to the floor, his body convulsing in apparent agony. The guards, their eyes wide with panic, rushed to open the cell. "What's happening to him?" one guard shouted, clearly out of his depth. As soon as the door swung open, Greg sprang into action. He swept the legs out from under the first guard, sending him crashing to the floor. In the same fluid motion, he grabbed the second guard's arm, using the Pakled's own momentum to slam him into the wall. Greg darted out of the cell, his heart pounding. He knew he had only moments before the alarm was raised. He sprinted down the corridor, his mind racing to recall the layout he had pieced together during his captivity. Just as Greg rounded a corner, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, bathing the sterile hallways in an eerie glow. Lieutenant Kraz's voice crackled over the facility's communication system. "Attention all units. The human prisoner has escaped. He is to be captured alive at all costs. Use non-lethal force only. I repeat, non-lethal force only." Outside, Commander Harper's team intercepted the alarm signals. Harper's eyebrows furrowed as he processed this new development. "Change of plans," he growled into his comm. "Our boys on the move. Janos, Reeves, initiate breach protocol. The rest of you, with me. We're going in hot." Controlled plasma charges detonated against the facility's outer wall, creating a spectacular light show that drew the attention of nearby Pakled forces. As guards rushed to investigate the breach, Harper led the rest of his team through a service entrance on the opposite side of the building. Inside, Greg navigated the maze-like corridors, his every sense on high alert. He could hear the sound of approaching footsteps and knew the Pakled security forces were closing in. As he rounded another corner, he collided hard with something solid. Greg stumbled back, ready to defend himself, only to find himself face to face with a human in advanced combat gear. Commander Harper quickly lowered his weapon. "Dr. Coleman?" Harper asked, his voice low and urgent. Greg nodded, still catching his breath. "Commander Jack Harper, Earth Special Forces. We're your extraction team. Stay close and follow my lead." Before Greg could respond, the sound of Pakled weapons fire filled the air. Harper's team returned fire, their advanced weaponry far outclassing the Pakled security forces. "Move!" Harper shouted, pushing Greg ahead of him as they ran down the corridor. As they fought their way through the facility, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. At first, it was barely noticeable, but the tremors quickly intensified. "What the hell is that?" one of Harper's team members shouted over the din of battle. Greg's mind raced. Could this be related to the precursor technology? Before he could voice his thoughts, a violent shake sent everyone, human and pack-led alike, stumbling. Suddenly, Lieutenant Kraz appeared at the end of the hallway, holding something that made Greg's blood run cold. In Kraz's hand was the crystal device, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. "Halt!" Kraz shouted, his voice barely audible over the rumbling of the facility. "Surrender now, or—" His words were cut short as the most powerful tremor yet rocked the building. The floor between the two groups split open, a yawning chasm appearing as if the planet itself was tearing apart. Kraz, caught off balance, fumbled with the crystal. Time seemed to slow as the device slipped from his grasp, tumbling into the widening fissure. As it fell, it emitted a blinding flash of light that engulfed Greg, Harper, and Kraz. When the light faded, the three found themselves in a vast chamber unlike anything they had ever seen. The walls pulsed with circuit-like patterns, casting an ethereal blue glow throughout the space. At the center stood a massive console, its alien design defying easy comprehension. As they watched in stunned silence, the console began to power up, responding to the proximity of the fallen crystal. Streams of energy coursed through the circuitry on the walls, bringing the ancient precursor technology to life. Greg, Harper, and Kraz exchanged wary glances, their previous conflict momentarily forgotten in the face of this extraordinary discovery. They stood at the precipice of something monumental, something that could forever alter the course of both human and pack-led civilizations. As the chamber hummed with awakening power, Greg took a tentative step towards the console. Whatever secrets this place held, he knew they were about to be revealed. Unveiled. Greg's hand hovered over the console, his fingers trembling with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. As he made contact with the smooth alien surface, a shimmering holographic display burst into existence, filling the air with intricate symbols and diagrams. "My God," Greg breathed, his eyes widening as he absorbed the wealth of information before him. Years of studying ancient languages and artifacts had prepared him for this moment, and his mind raced to decipher the complex alien script. Commander Harper maintained a vigilant watch on the chamber's entrance, his weapon at the ready. "Talk to me, Coleman. What are we looking at here?" Lieutenant Kraz, still reeling from the sudden turn of events, found himself drawn to the mesmerizing display. His initial hostility towards the humans gave way to an insatiable curiosity. This technology, it's unlike anything in pack-led records. Greg's fingers danced across the holographic interface, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's a control hub," he announced, his voice filled with awe. "This chamber, it's part of a vast network of terraforming technology spread across the entire planet." Harper shot a questioning glance at Greg. "Terraforming? You mean like changing a planet's environment?" Greg nodded, his eyes never leaving the display. "Exactly. The precursors designed this system to transform inhospitable worlds into habitable ones. But it's been dormant for thousands of years, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate." As Greg delved deeper into the console's data, his expression shifted from excitement to shock. "This can't be right," he muttered, double-checking his translations. Kraz stepped closer, his antenna twitching with agitation. "What is it? What have you found?" Greg turned to face the pack-led lieutenant, his voice gentle but firm. "Lieutenant Kraz, according to this data, the pack-led aren't native to Zephyria. Your ancestors were brought here by the precursors as part of an experiment in species cultivation." The words hit Kraz like a physical blow. He staggered back, his mind turning as he struggled to process this earth-shattering revelation. "No, that's impossible. Our history, our traditions—" Before Kraz could fully grapple with this new reality, the chamber shook violently. Dust and small debris rained down from the ceiling as the tremors intensified. Harper steadied himself against a wall. "Coleman, what's happening?" Greg's fingers flew across the console, pulling up new data streams. The terraforming network is reactivating, but something's wrong. The removal of the crystal device has triggered a premature start to the process. If we don't stop it, these geological changes could render Zephyria uninhabitable for both Pakled and humans. As if in response to Greg's words, a new holographic window materialized, showing a live feed from the planet's surface. Cities were in chaos, buildings swaying dangerously as the ground beneath them heaved and buckled. "We need to get this information to the surface," Harper said, his tactical mind already formulating a plan. "If we can't stop this, we need to at least warn people to evacuate." Kraz, still visibly shaken by the revelations about his people's origins, straightened his posture. I can help with that. My security clearance should allow me to broadcast a planet-wide message." Greg looked at Kraz with newfound respect. "Are you sure? This information could destabilize your entire society." Kraz nodded solemnly. "My duty is to protect my people. If this is the truth, they deserve to know it." As Kraz began the process of sending out the broadcast, a new voice crackled to life over Greg's communication device. Greg, can you hear me? This is Ilara Voss." Greg's eyes lit up with recognition. "Dr. Voss, you're at the secondary precursor site?" "Affirmative," Voss replied, her voice tinged with excitement. "I've accessed a similar control interface here. We need to combine our data to get a full picture of what we're dealing with." For the next several minutes, Greg and Voss exchanged information, their words flying back and forth in a rapid-fire exchange of scientific jargon. Harper and Kraz watched in amazement as the two scientists pieced together the puzzle of the precursor network. "I think I've got it," Greg announced, his face illuminated by the glow of the holographic display. "We can recalibrate the terraforming system to stabilize the planet, but we'll need to access multiple control hubs simultaneously." Kraz, who had just finished sending out his broadcast, turned to Greg with a determined look. "Then that's what we'll do, my people and yours, working together to save Zephyria." As if on cue, the chamber's communication system crackled to life, filled with the angry voice of General Dorn. "Lieutenant Kraz, you are hereby ordered to arrest the humans and report to High Command immediately. This is an act of treason." Kraz's antenna drooped for a moment before he straightened up, his perseverance evident in his stance. "I'm sorry, General, but I cannot comply. The future of our world is at stake." Harper checked his weapon, his face grim. "Looks like we've got company coming. We need to move, now." Greg quickly downloaded as much data as he could onto a portable device. "We need to reach the other control hubs. It's our only chance to stabilize the planet." As the group prepared to leave the chamber, the ground shook again, more violently than before. Cracks began to appear in the walls, and the ancient technology around them groaned under the strain. "Let's move!" Harper shouted, taking point as they rushed towards the chamber's exit. Greg cast one last look at the magnificent precursor console before following the others. As they raced through the crumbling underground complex, he couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Zephyria held and what challenges they would face in their desperate mission to save the planet. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but Greg knew they had no choice. With each step, they moved closer to their goal, leaving behind the safety of the precursor chamber and venturing into a world turned upside down by revelation and catastrophe. Geological upheaval. The ground beneath their feet shuddered and cracked, forcing Greg, Harper, and Kraz to navigate an increasingly treacherous landscape. As they emerged from the underground complex, they were met with a world in chaos. The once pristine surface of Zephyria had been transformed into a hellscape of fractured earth and billowing clouds of superheated gas. Massive fissures split the ground, releasing plumes of steam and noxious fumes that obscured their vision and made breathing difficult. "We need to reach the next control hub," Greg shouted over the rumbling of the planet. He pulled out a portable device, its screen flickering with data downloaded from the precursor console. According to this, the nearest hub is about 10 kilometers to the northwest. Harper scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the dangers ahead. "That's going to be one hell of a trek. We'll need to be careful. One wrong step, and we could end up in one of those chasms." Kraz's antenna twitched as he processed the information from his surroundings. I know this area, he said, his voice tinged with a mix of dedication and worry. There's an old pack-led mining outpost about halfway to our destination. We might be able to find supplies there. As they set out, the trio had to constantly adjust their route to avoid the widening fissures and jets of superheated gas erupting from the ground. The landscape was changing rapidly, familiar landmarks disappearing or being altered beyond recognition. At one point, a massive tremor shook the ground, causing a nearby cliff face to collapse. Harper reacted instantly, grabbing Greg and Kraz and pulling them back, just as a wave of debris rushed past them. "That was too close," Greg gasped, his heart pounding in his chest. Kraz nodded grimly. "We must hurry. The planet's deterioration is accelerating faster than we anticipated." As they pressed on, Greg's communication device crackled to life once more. "Greg, it's Alara again. I've made an incredible discovery at the secondary site." Greg listened intently as Dr. Voss described the hidden chamber and the cache of precursor artifacts she had uncovered. His eyes widened as she mentioned the holographic map revealing the locations of all major precursor installations across Zephyria. "Alara, this is amazing," Greg replied, his mind racing with the implications. "If we can access these other installations, we might have a better chance of stabilizing the planet." Their conversation was cut short as Harper signaled for silence. In the distance, they could hear the distinctive whine of pack-led hover vehicles. "Looks like we've got company," Harper muttered, his hand moving to his weapon. "General Dorn must have sent out search parties." Kraz's antennae drooped slightly. "I never thought I'd be on this side of a manhunt," he said quietly. The group quickly took cover behind a large boulder, watching as a pack-led patrol swept the area. Greg's mind raced, trying to find a way to evade capture while still making progress towards their goal. Suddenly, Kraz's communication device buzzed. He hesitated for a moment before answering, keeping his voice low. "This is Lieutenant Kraz." The voice on the other end was unfamiliar to Greg and Harper. "Lieutenant, this is Dr. Zix. I've been monitoring the planet's condition, and I believe I can help, but we must act quickly." Kraz's eyes widened in recognition. "Dr. Zix, the geological expert? How did you know to contact me?" "There's no time to explain," Zix replied urgently. "My team and I have been conducting secret research into Zephyria's unique properties for years. Our data confirms what you've discovered about the planet's instability. We need to combine our knowledge if we're to have any hope of saving Zephyria." Greg, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Dr. Zix, this is Dr. Greg Coleman. We need your expertise. Can you meet us?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "It's risky, but yes. I have a hidden research facility in the Crimson Canyons. I'm sending you the coordinates now. But be warned, the geological activity in that area has become extremely volatile." As Kraz received the coordinates, another violent tremor shook the ground. In the distance, they could see a massive fissure opening up, swallowing an entire section of the landscape. Harper surveyed the unfolding destruction with a grim expression. "We need to move now. Those pack-led patrols are the least of our worries if this planet tears itself apart." Greg nodded, his face set with purpose. "Agreed. Let's go find Dr. Zix and see if we can put a stop to this madness." As they set out towards the Crimson Canyons, navigating the increasingly unstable terrain, Greg couldn't help but wonder about the other developments unfolding across Zephyria. What was happening at the pack-led capital? And what of the human forces that might be on their way to help? Little did they know that high above Zephiria's turbulent surface, another confrontation was brewing, one that could have dire consequences for both humans and pack-led alike. The group pressed on, their path illuminated by the eerie glow of lava flows that were beginning to emerge from the widening fissures. Time was running out, and the fate of an entire world hung in the balance. As they navigated the treacherous landscape, Greg, Harper, and Kraz knew that their next steps could determine the future of not just Zephyria, but of human pack-led relations for generations to come. The trio pressed on, their path illuminated by the eerie glow of emerging lava flows. As they crested a ridge, they suddenly found themselves face to face with a massive sinkhole that hadn't been there moments before. The chasm stretched across the landscape, a gaping wound in the earth that effectively blocked their route to Dr. Zix's hidden research facility. Greg wiped sweat from his brow, surveying the obstacle before them. We can't go around it. It's too wide, and who knows how stable the edges are. Harper nodded grimly. Agreed. We need to find another way. Kraz's antennae twitched as he considered their options. There's a dense Zephyrian forest to the east. It's not the most hospitable terrain, but it might be our best chance to bypass this sinkhole. With no other viable alternatives, the group set off towards the forest. As they entered the tree line, the air grew thick and humid. Strange, phosphorescent plants cast an otherworldly glow, providing just enough light to navigate by. Watch your step, Kraz warned. Some of these plants are carnivorous, and there are creatures here that would consider us a tasty snack. As if on cue, a nearby bush rustled ominously. Harper raised his weapon, eyes scanning the undergrowth for potential threats. They had been trekking through the forest for nearly an hour when a pained groan caught their attention. Greg held up a hand, signaling the others to stop. Did you hear that? The sound came again, louder this time. Cautiously, they approached its source, pushing aside a curtain of luminescent vines to reveal a clearing. There, propped against a fallen log, was a pack-led scout. His uniform was torn and stained with blood, and he clutched his side in obvious pain. It's Tark, Kraz whispered, recognizing the injured Packled. He's one of General Dorn's men, must have been sent to track us. Harper's grip tightened on his weapon. He's a threat. We should leave him. Greg, however, was already moving towards the injured Packled. We can't just leave him here to die. He needs medical attention. Dr. Coleman, Harper hissed, this is a bad idea. He could give away our position. Greg knelt beside Tark, who eyed him warily. I'm a doctor. I want to help you. Tark's antennae twitched nervously. Why would you help me? I'm your enemy. Because it's the right thing to do, Greg replied simply, already examining Tark's wound. It was a nasty gash, likely from a fall or an encounter with the local wildlife. Greg reached into his pack for medical supplies. As Greg worked to clean and bandage the wound, Kraz approached cautiously. Tark, what happened? Where are the others? Tark winced as Greg applied a disinfectant. Separated. During the quakes, I fell into a ravine. Thought I was done for. Harper kept watch, his posture tense. We need to move. If he's here, others might be close behind. Greg finished treating Tark's wound and helped him to his feet. Can you walk? Tark nodded, still eyeing the humans with a mix of confusion and grudging gratitude. Thank you. But why? Because that's what humans do, Greg replied. We help those in need, even if they're supposed to be our enemies. Tark's antennae drooped slightly, a sign of deep thought among the Packled. After a moment, he straightened up. I will not hinder your mission. Perhaps there is more to humans than we have been led to believe. With Tark now an uneasy ally, the group continued their journey through the forest. The planet's upheaval seemed to intensify with each passing minute, the ground beneath their feet trembling almost constantly. As they neared the edge of the forest, Greg's communication device crackled to life. Greg, can you hear me? It was Dr. Alara Voss, her voice tinged with excitement and a hint of apprehension. Alara, what's your status? Greg replied, relieved to hear from his colleague. I've reached the central precursor installation, Voss reported. It's incredible, Greg. The mountain itself is shifting, revealing a massive door. I think I've triggered some kind of security system. Before Greg could respond, a deafening rumble filled the air. The group watched in awe as a distant mountain range began to move, its peaks splitting apart to reveal glimpses of colossal structures hidden within. Ilara, be careful, Greg warned. We're on our way to Dr. Zix's facility now. Once we have his research, we'll head your way. As the communication cut out, Harper pointed to a cliff face ahead. There, that must be Zix's hidden facility. The structure was well camouflaged, barely distinguishable from the surrounding rock. As they approached, however, it became clear that something was amiss. The entrance was ajar, and signs of a hasty departure were evident. Something's wrong, Kraz said, his antennae twitching nervously. It looks abandoned. Cautiously, the group entered the facility. The interior was a mess of overturned equipment and scattered data pads. Greg moved quickly to a central console, his fingers flying over the controls. "I've found Zix's research logs," he announced, his eyes widening as he scanned the information. This is unbelievable. The Pakaled government has known about the precursor technology for decades. They've been keeping it secret to maintain control. Before anyone could react to this revelation, the sound of footsteps echoed from a nearby corridor. Harper raised his weapon, positioning himself between the others and the potential threat. "We've got company," he warned, just as a group of armed Pakled burst into the room. "In the name of General Dorn, surrender immediately," shouted their leader, a stern-faced pack lead with lieutenant insignia. Greg's mind raced, knowing that the information they had discovered could change everything. As the standoff intensified, he realized that their next actions could determine not just their fate, but the fate of Zephyria itself. Greg's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The armed Pakled had them cornered, but he knew the information they'd discovered was too important to lose. In a split-second decision, he grabbed a nearby datapad and tossed it to Harper. "Run!" Greg shouted. "Get that information to safety." Harper caught the datapad and hesitated for just a moment before nodding grimly. He darted towards a side exit, drawing the Pakled's fire. Kraz and Tark provided covering fire, allowing Harper to escape into the twisting corridors of the facility. Greg turned to the Pakled leader, hands raised. "We're not your enemies. We're trying to save your planet." The Pakled lieutenant's antennae twitched skeptically. "Lies! You're here to steal our secrets." Before Greg could respond, the ground beneath them lurched violently. The tremor was far stronger than any they'd experienced before, and the sound of tearing metal filled the air as the facility began to collapse around them. "We need to get out of here," Kraz shouted over the din. In the chaos that ensued, Greg, Kraz, and Tark managed to slip away from their Pakled pursuers. They emerged from the crumbling facility into a landscape that had transformed yet again. The ground was split by massive fissures, and in the distance, entire sections of the planet's crust were shifting. Greg's communication device crackled to life. "Greg, are you there?" It was Harper's voice, strained but determined. "Harper, we're okay. Where are you?" "I've made it out of the facility. I'm heading towards the central precursor installation. Meet me there if you can." Greg looked at Kraz and Tark. "We need to get to that installation. It might be our only chance to stop this." Kraz nodded, but Tark looked uncertain. I don't know if I can continue with you. My people." Greg placed a hand on Tark's shoulder. "I understand, but right now, the best way to help your people is to stop this planetary destruction. Will you help us?" After a moment's hesitation, Tark nodded. "I will." The trio set off across the fractured landscape, Greg leading the way. He used his knowledge of geological formations to identify the most stable paths, avoiding areas that looked prone to sudden collapses. As they navigated a particularly treacherous section, they heard cries for help. In a nearby ravine, a group of Pakled civilians were trapped, their escape route cut off by a widening fissure. Without hesitation, Greg began to climb down towards them. Kraz called out, "Dr. Coleman, what are you doing?" "We can't leave them," Greg replied, already halfway down the slope. The trapped Pakled recoiled as Greg approached, fear evident in their expressions. Greg held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "It's okay. We're here to help." Using a combination of climbing gear and improvised tools, Greg, Kraz, and Tark worked to create a safe path for the Pakled civilians. As the last of them was pulled to safety, another tremor shook the ground. One of the rescued Pakled, a young female, stumbled and nearly fell back into the ravine. Greg caught her arm, pulling her back from the edge. She looked at him with wide eyes, her antennae quivering. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm Lyra." As the group continued their journey, Lyra stuck close to Greg. He noticed that she seemed to tense up just before each tremor, almost as if she could sense them coming. "Lyra," Greg asked, "can you feel the energy fluctuations?" Lyra nodded hesitantly. "I've always been able to. Is that not normal?" Greg's mind raced with the implications. "It's extraordinary, and it might be exactly what we need." With Lyra's help, the group made much faster progress. She could sense areas of intense seismic activity, allowing them to avoid the most dangerous zones. The other pack-led civilians, seeing the cooperation between Lyra and the humans, began to let go of their initial distrust. As they neared the central precursor installation, a massive energy barrier came into view, shimmering like a heat haze across the landscape. Greg's heart sank. How were they supposed to get past that? Lyra stepped forward, her antennae twitching rapidly. The barrier. It's not constant. It fluctuates with the planet's tremors. Greg's eyes widened as he realized what she was suggesting. You think we can time our approach to pass through during a moment of instability? Lyra nodded, her expression a mix of fear and dedication. Just then, Greg's communication device crackled again. Greg, it's Ilara. I'm inside the central installation. You won't believe what I found. Ilara, thank goodness you're all right. What have you discovered? There's an AI, Greg, a precursor AI. It's called Guardian, and it's trying to communicate with me. I think it might hold the key to saving Zephyria. Greg looked at the energy barrier, then back at his companions. All right, everyone. We have one shot at this. Lyra, you'll need to guide us. When you feel the next big tremor coming, give us the signal. The group tensed, waiting. The ground rumbled constantly now, but they needed a truly massive quake to cause enough instability in the barrier. Suddenly, Lyra gasped. Now, it's coming! The planet seemed to groan as the biggest tremor yet tore through the landscape. The energy barrier flickered and wavered. Go! Greg shouted, and they ran towards the barrier. For a heart-stopping moment, it felt like they were pushing against an immovable wall. Then, with a sensation like plunging into icy water, they were through. As they stumbled to a stop on the other side, Greg looked up to see a sight that took his breath away. The mountain before them was splitting apart, revealing glimpses of colossal structures hidden within. And at the base of the mountain stood Ilara, her face illuminated by the glow of a holographic interface. Greg and his unlikely group of allies approached, knowing that whatever happened next would determine the fate of Zephyria and perhaps the future of human pack-led relations. As they drew closer, the holographic interface flickered, and a voice unlike any Greg had ever heard began to speak. Greetings, Seekers, it said. I am Guardian. The fate of this world now rests in your hands. Hands. The Guardian's voice reverberated through the chamber, a blend of ancient wisdom and urgent concern. Greg stepped forward, his mind racing to process the enormity of what they were facing. Guardian, what exactly is happening to Zephyria? In response, the AI projected a three-dimensional map of the planet, pulsating with vibrant energy signatures. Critical points of instability flashed across the surface and deep within the core, painting a dire picture of the planet's condition. The precursor terraforming system was designed for gradual planetary transformation over millennia, the Guardian explained. Its sudden reactivation has triggered a catastrophic chain reaction. Zephyria's core is rapidly destabilizing. Without intervention, the planet will tear itself apart within hours. Dr. Voss's face paled. Hours? That's all the time we have? Greg's archaeological instincts kicked in as he studied the holographic interface. Intricate symbols and patterns danced before his eyes, slowly resolving into recognizable forms. There must be a way to stop this. The precursors wouldn't create a system without failsafes. Lyra stepped closer, her antennae twitching rapidly. The energy, it's singing to me. I can almost understand. Greg glanced at her, an idea forming. Lyra, your sensitivity to the energy fluctuations. Can you help us interpret this interface? As Lyra nodded, Dr. Voss joined them, her expertise in xenotechnology proving invaluable. Together, the unlikely trio began to decipher the complex precursor controls. Look here, Greg pointed to a pulsating node on the map. These must be control points spread across the planet. If we can recalibrate them, we might be able to stabilize the core, Dr. Voss finished, her eyes lighting up with hope. The Guardian's voice cut through their excitement. Correct. However, the recalibration requires simultaneous activation of multiple control nodes across Zephyria. Time is of the essence. As if to emphasize the AI's words, a violent tremor shook the installation. Dust and small debris rained from the ceiling, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift. Suddenly, Greg's communication device crackled to life. "Dr. Coleman, this is Captain Elena Chen of the HSS Galileo. We've received urgent communications from Earth. The Interstellar Relations Committee has authorized additional human ships to assist in stabilizing Zephyria." Before Greg could respond, Kraz burst into the chamber, his antennae twitching with agitation. "The Pac-led military is mobilizing. They're moving to intercept your human fleet." The situation was escalating rapidly, both on the ground and in orbit. Greg knew they needed to act fast to prevent a potential conflict that could doom them all. "Captain Chen," Greg replied, "we've discovered a way to stabilize the planet, but we'll need both human and Pac-led cooperation. Can you try to de-escalate the situation in orbit while we work down here?" "Understood, Dr. Coleman. We'll do our best to maintain peace up here. Good luck." As Greg turned back to the group, a new commotion drew their attention. A group of Pac-led scientists and engineers rushed into the chamber, led by a striking female Pac-led with piercing eyes and an air of authority. "I'm Dr. Mira Zen, Chief Geophysicist of Zephyria," she announced, her gaze sweeping over the assembled humans and Pac-led. "We've brought critical data on our planet's geological composition. We want to help." Greg quickly introduced Dr. Zen to the team and briefed her on their discoveries. Her expertise proved invaluable as they worked to interface human and Pac-led technology with the ancient precursor systems. As they labored to recalibrate the terraforming network, the chamber shuddered with the strongest tremor yet. A section of the ceiling collapsed, trapping several Pac-led scientists, including Dr. Zen, under a pile of debris. Without hesitation, Greg sprang into action. "Everyone, stay calm. We need to get them out carefully to avoid further collapses." Drawing on his knowledge of structural integrity from years of archaeological excavations, Greg coordinated the rescue effort. He directed the team to strategically remove debris, using makeshift supports to prevent further cave-ins. As they worked, Greg could hear Dr. Zen's muffled voice from beneath the rubble, calmly directing her trapped colleagues. Her composure under pressure was remarkable. Finally, they broke through. Greg reached down, grasping Dr. Zen's hand and pulling her to safety. The Pac-led scientist looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and newfound respect. "Thank you, Dr. Coleman," she said, brushing dust from her clothes. "Your quick thinking saved our lives." The rescue had cost them precious time, but it had also cemented a growing trust between the humans and Pac-led present. As they returned to the central console, the Guardian spoke again. "The recalibration is nearly complete, but manual activation of several outlying control nodes is necessary to finalize the process." Greg's mind raced as he assessed their options. They needed to split up to reach the distant nodes in time, but the planet's surface was becoming increasingly dangerous. "We'll form mixed teams," Greg announced, looking around at the assembled humans and Pac-led. "Each team will be responsible for activating one of the outlying nodes." As Greg began assigning teams, Dr. Voss approached him with a concerned expression. "What about the node in the volcanic region? It's by far the most dangerous." Greg met her gaze steadily. "I'll take that one myself." As the teams prepared to deploy, the floor beneath them heaved ominously. The tremors were intensifying, and time was running out. Greg knew that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of Zephyria, but the future of human Pac-led relations. With a final nod to his companions, Greg led his team towards the exit, ready to face the hellish landscape that awaited them outside. The race to save Zephyria had begun in earnest, and failure was not an option. Greg led his team out of the precursor installation and into the chaotic landscape of Zephyria. The ground shuddered beneath their feet, and the air was thick with ash and the acrid smell of sulfur. Lyra and two other Pac-led volunteers followed close behind, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and tenacity. As they approached the volcanic region, the terrain became increasingly treacherous. Rivers of molten rock carved new paths through the landscape, and plumes of superheated gas burst from fissures in the ground. Greg's archaeological experience had prepared him for difficult terrain, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. "Stay close," Greg called out to his team, his voice barely audible over the rumble of the volcano. "Watch your footing and signal if you need help." Lyra's antennae twitched rapidly as they neared their objective. "The energy is so intense here," she said, her voice filled with awe and apprehension. "It's like a storm of power beneath our feet." Greg nodded, grateful for Lyra's unique abilities. Her sensitivity to the precursor energy had already proven invaluable, and he had a feeling they would need it now more than ever. As they crested a ridge of cooled lava rock, Greg held up a hand, signaling the team to stop. Ahead of them, surrounding the control node, was a group of pack-led soldiers in sleek, heat-resistant armor. Their weapons gleamed in the hellish light of the lava flows. "General Dorn's elite guards," one of the pack-led volunteers whispered, his antennae drooping in fear. Before Greg could formulate a plan, one of the guards spotted them. A shout went up, and suddenly the air was filled with the sizzle of energy weapons. Greg and his team dove for cover behind a formation of lava rock as blasts of superheated plasma scorched the ground around them. "We need to reach that node," Greg shouted over the din of battle. He peered around their cover, his mind racing. The guards' positions were strong, but they were also vulnerable to the unpredictable lava flows surrounding them. Greg's eyes tracked the movement of the molten rock, his years of studying geological formations allowing him to predict its path. There, he pointed to a spot where a new lava stream was about to break through. "When that flow hits, it'll force them to reposition. That's our chance." The team waited, tense and ready. Seconds stretched into minutes as the firefight continued. Then, with a thunderous crack, the lava broke through exactly where Greg had predicted. The guards scrambled to avoid the molten flow, their formations breaking. "Now!" Greg shouted. They burst from cover, using the thick ash clouds as concealment. Lyra took the lead, her sensitivity to the precursor energy guiding them through the treacherous terrain. They weaved between lava flows and steam vents, the heat searing their lungs with every breath. They reached the control node just as the guards realized they had been outmaneuvered. Greg immediately set to work, his hands flying over the ancient technology. The node had been damaged by the extreme conditions, its delicate circuitry warped by heat and shaken by tremors. "Lyra, I need your help," Greg called out. "Use your sensitivity to guide me. We need to calibrate this correctly, or we could make things worse." As Greg worked to repair and activate the node, the two pack-led volunteers took up defensive positions. The elite guards had regrouped and were launching a fierce counterattack. Energy weapons fire filled the air, the beams distorted by the heat haze rising from the lava flows. Greg's world narrowed to the control node and Lyra's guidance. His fingers moved with precision, applying the knowledge he had gained from Dr. Voss and his own studies of precursor technology. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes closed in concentration as she interpreted the energy flows. A stray blast from the guard's weapons struck nearby, triggering a localized tremor. The ground beneath them heaved and Greg stumbled, nearly losing his grip on the delicate components he was manipulating. "Greg!" Lyra cried out in warning. He looked up to see a massive plume of ash and superheated gas erupting from a newly formed fissure. The volcanic blast threatened to engulf them all, his team and the attacking guards alike. In that moment, Greg made a choice. His hands flew over the controls, reprogramming the partially activated node. With a surge of energy, a shimmering barrier sprang into existence, enveloping both his team and the pack-led guards. The superheated gas washed over the shield, unable to penetrate. The guards ceased fire, shocked by the humans' act of protection. In the sudden quiet, broken only by the rumble of the volcano, Greg completed the activation sequence. The node hummed to life, emitting a pulse of energy that visibly calmed the chaos around them. Lava flows cooled and solidified, and the ash clouds began to dissipate. Greg turned to face the pack-led guards, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We're not your enemies," he called out. "We're here to save Zephyria, your home. This crisis affects all of us, human and pack-led alike." The guards lowered their weapons, the leader stepping forward with a mix of confusion and respect in his eyes. "You protected us. Why?" "Because we're all in this together," Greg replied. "The only way we survive this is by working together." As the guards processed this, Greg's communication device crackled to life. Dr. Voss's voice came through, tinged with excitement and urgency. "Greg, the node you activated has stabilized a significant portion of the planet, but we're not out of the woods yet. There are still more nodes that need to be brought online. Greg looked out over the shifting landscape of Zephyria, noting how the geography had already changed dramatically since their arrival. Their planned route to the next node was now cut off by a massive chasm that hadn't existed hours before. "Understood, Dr. Voss," Greg replied. "We'll find another way, over and out." He turned to his expanded team, now including the converted pack-led guards. "All right, everyone, we've got more work to do. Let's move out." As they set off towards their next objective, Greg knew that the challenges ahead would test them all. But looking at the mixed group of humans and pack-led working together, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had taken the first crucial steps towards saving Zephyria and forging a new understanding between their peoples. Now they just had to finish what they'd started. The team moved swiftly, their footsteps echoing through the ever-changing landscape of Zephyria. As they crested a hill, Greg's heart sank. Before them stretched a vast chasm, cutting across their path like a jagged wound in the earth. The planned route to the next control node was now impassable, severed by the planet's violent upheaval. "Damn," Greg muttered, his mind racing. He scanned the horizon, years of archaeological fieldwork kicking in as he analyzed the terrain. "There." He pointed to a spot where the chasm narrowed slightly. "That might be our best chance to cross." The team approached the edge cautiously. Even at its narrowest point, the gap was too wide to jump, and the ground on either side was far too unstable to support a makeshift bridge. "Any ideas?" Greg asked, looking at his diverse team of humans and pack-led. One of the converted pack-led guards, a stocky individual with vibrant blue antennae, stepped forward. "I'm Grok," he said, his voice gruff but determined. "I was part of the pack-led engineering corps before joining the guards. Those crystalline formations," he gestured to the glittering structures dotting the landscape, "we could use them to create stepping stones across the chasm." Greg's eyes lit up. "Brilliant, Grok. How do we do it?" "Our energy weapons," Grok explained. "We can use them to cut and shape the crystals. If we're precise, we can create a series of platforms to cross the gap." Without wasting a moment, the team set to work. Humans and pack-led worked side by side, carefully cutting away at the massive crystal formations. The air filled with the hum of energy weapons and the sharp crack of cleaving crystal. As they worked, the ground beneath them continued to rumble and shift. Greg kept a wary eye on their surroundings, acutely aware of the danger they faced. "Steady now," he called out as two team members maneuvered a large crystal section into place. "We need to—" His words were cut short as a violent tremor rocked the area. The edge of the chasm where they stood began to crumble. Two team members, a human scientist and a pack-led guard, lost their footing and tumbled into the abyss. "No!" Greg shouted, rushing to the edge. Without hesitation, he began organizing a rescue. "Lyra, I need your energy sensing. Guide us to stable ground. Grok, help me secure these ropes." Using the partially completed crystal bridge, Greg led a small team down into the chasm. Lyra's abilities proved invaluable as she directed them away from unstable areas. After tense minutes of careful maneuvering, they reached the fallen team members, finding them battered but alive. As they pulled the rescued pair to safety, Greg felt the urgency of their mission weigh heavily upon him. "We need to move faster," he urged the team. "Zephyria's running out of time." They redoubled their efforts, the crystal bridge taking shape more quickly now. As they neared completion, Greg spotted movement on the far side of the chasm. His heart sank as he recognized the uniforms of pack-led loyalists, still faithful to General Dorn's regime. "Hold your fire," Greg commanded as both sides raised their weapons. He stepped forward, activating his universal translator. "We're not your enemies," he called out to the loyalists. "We're here to save Zephyria. Your home is in grave danger." The loyalists responded with skepticism and hostile gestures. Greg persisted, explaining the crisis and the importance of their mission. As he spoke, the ground shook violently, a massive energy surge rippling through the planet. The loyalists watched in awe as the area around the activated control node remained relatively stable amidst the chaos. The visible cooperation between humans and pack-led on Greg's team seemed to give them pause. A seasoned pack-led soldier stepped forward from the loyalist group. "I am Krell," he announced, his antennae twitching with curiosity. Why should we believe you? Before Greg could respond, his communication device crackled to life. Dr. Voss's voice came through, urgent and excited. Greg, we've decoded more data from the Guardian AI. There's a master control node hidden in the largest mountain range. If we can activate it, it could stabilize the entire planet at once. Greg's mind raced with the implications. He looked at Krell and the Loyalists, then back at his team. The success of their mission now hinged not just on their current allies, but potentially on these former adversaries as well. Krell, Greg said, his voice firm with perseverance, I propose a joint expedition. Humans, pack lead, all of us working together to reach this master control node. It's our best chance to save Zephyria. Will you join us? Krell's antennae quivered as he considered the offer. The fate of their world hung in the balance, and the decision they made now would shape the future of not just Zephyria, but of human pack-led relations for generations to come. Come? The air crackled with tension as Krell considered Greg's proposal, his antennae twitching in contemplation. Your actions today have shown a commitment to Zephyria's survival, Krell said, his voice gravelly but tinged with newfound respect. We will join your expedition. Greg nodded, relief washing over him. Thank you, Krell. Together, we stand a better chance of reaching the master control node and saving this planet. As the two groups merged, Greg quickly organized their expanded team. He assigned roles based on individual strengths, pairing humans with pack-led to foster cooperation. With a shared sense of purpose, they set out towards the largest mountain range on Zephyria. The journey proved treacherous from the start. Massive sinkholes opened up without warning, forcing the team to constantly adjust their route. Greg's geological expertise came into play as he guided them around unstable areas. Watch your step, he called out as the ground beneath them shuddered. A chasm split the earth mere meters from where they stood, the sound of crumbling rock echoing through the air. The atmosphere grew thicker with toxic gases, making breathing increasingly difficult. Greg distributed the limited supply of human-made air filters, ensuring both humans and pack lead received equal protection. These will help filter out the worst of it, he explained, demonstrating how to attach the devices to their breathing apparatus. But we'll need to ration their use. They won't last forever. As they trekked onward, the team encountered a pack-led military outpost still loyal to General Dorn. The guards raised their weapons as soon as they spotted the approaching group. Halt! Shouted the outpost commander, his voice amplified by the outpost's communication system. You are in violation of General Dorn's orders. Surrender immediately. Greg stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. We're not here to fight, he called out. We're on a mission to save Zephyria. Your planet is in grave danger. Krell moved to stand beside Greg, addressing his fellow packlet. I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. The humans speak the truth. We must work together if we hope to survive. The outpost commander hesitated, his antennae twitching with uncertainty. Greg seized the moment, activating a holographic display of the planet's deteriorating condition. Look, he said, pointing to the areas where they had activated control nodes. We've already managed to stabilize parts of the planet, but there's a master control node hidden in the mountains that could save all of Zephyria. We need your help to reach it. The commander studied the holographic display, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern. After a tense moment, he lowered his weapon. Very well, we will allow you passage. May your mission succeed for all our sakes. With the outpost behind them, the team pressed on towards the looming mountain range. As they approached, a massive storm system came into view, generated by the planet's atmospheric instability. Lightning arced across the sky, striking the ground with terrifying frequency. Winds howled, carrying corrosive rain that sizzled as it hit their protective gear. Greg's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes fell on a familiar crystalline formation jutting from the ground. Those crystal structures, he said, in idea forming. We can use them as natural lightning rods to create a safer path through the storm. He quickly outlined his plan to the team. They would need to split into smaller groups, each responsible for positioning the crystalline rods at specific intervals. It's risky, Greg admitted, but it's our best chance of making it through this storm in one piece. The team divided, with humans and packlet working side by side. Greg paired with Grok, the former Packlet engineer, to tackle a particularly challenging section. As they maneuvered a large crystal into position, a bolt of lightning struck nearby, the thunderclap so loud it left their ears ringing. The ground beneath them shook, nearly causing them to lose their grip on the crystal. "Steady," Greg called out, straining to be heard over the wind. "Just a little further." With a final push, they set the crystal in place. As if in response, a lightning bolt struck the rod, the electricity arcing harmlessly into the ground. Across the storm-ravaged landscape, other teams reported similar successes. Slowly but surely, a protected corridor began to take shape. As they regrouped to make their way through the newly created path, Greg's communication device crackled to life. Dr. Voss's voice came through, urgent and filled with static. "Greg, can you hear me? The Guardian AI has detected a critical energy buildup in Zephyria's core. If we don't activate the master control node within the next few hours, the entire planet could explode." The gravity of the situation settled over the team like a heavy weight. They exchanged determined looks, no words necessary to convey the urgency of their task. With renewed purpose, they began their ascent up the mountain. The slope was treacherous, rendered even more dangerous by constant seismic activity. Rock slides threatened to sweep them away at any moment, while sudden fissures opened up beneath their feet. Greg led the way, calling upon all his experience to guide them safely. "Step where I step," he instructed, carefully testing each foothold before moving forward. Lyra, her eyes closed in concentration, used her sensitivity to precursor energy to warn of impending danger. "Shift left," she called out suddenly. "The ground to our right is about to give way." The team scrambled to follow her instruction, and not a moment too soon. The spot where they had been standing crumbled away, rocks tumbling down the mountainside. Halfway up the mountain, Greg spotted an anomaly in the rock face. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was an ancient precursor elevator system, hidden away for millennia. "This could be our ticket to the top," Greg said, excitement creeping into his voice despite their dire circumstances. "But it looks like it needs some work to get running again." He turned to Grok, the Packlet engineer. "What do you think? Can we get this operational?" Grok examined the system, his antenna twitching as he processed the challenge. "It's possible," he said after a moment. "With your human technology and our Packlet knowledge, we might just pull it off." As Greg and Grok set to work on the elevator, the rest of the team took up defensive positions. The commotion had attracted the attention of native creatures, driven from their habitats by the planet's upheaval. Screeching cries filled the air as a swarm of winged beasts descended upon them. Humans and Packlet stood shoulder to shoulder, energy weapons at the ready. "Hold the line!" Krell shouted, blasting a creature out of the sky. "Give them time to repair the elevator." The battle raged as Greg and Grok worked feverishly to restore power to the ancient machinery. Sweat beaded on Greg's forehead as he connected wires and rerouted power conduits. "Almost there," he muttered, more to himself than to Grok. "Just one more connection and—" The elevator hummed to life, its long dormant systems awakening. A cheer went up from the team, quickly drowned out by the screech of twisting metal. "It's not stable," Greg realized, his heart sinking. "We can't all go up at once. We'll have to send a smaller team." He quickly assessed the situation, making a difficult decision. "Lyra, Krell, and Dr. Samson, you're with me. The rest of you continue up the mountain as a backup plan." As the chosen four entered the elevator, the mountain shuddered violently. The ancient mechanism groaned under the strain, and halfway up, it ground to a halt. Greg looked at his team, trapped in the elevator shaft with time running out for Zephyria. His mind raced, formulating a plan that would push them all to their limits. "We're going to have to climb the rest of the way," he said, his voice steady despite the danger. "We'll use our gear and whatever precursor tech we can salvage to create a climbing system." As they began to gather materials for their ascent, the elevator creaked ominously. Greg knew they were in a race against time, not just to save the planet, but to survive the climb itself. With determined focus, he began to outline his plan for scaling the shaft, acutely aware that the fate of Zephyria rested on their ability to reach the master control node before it was too late. Too late. As Greg finished outlining his plan for scaling the shaft, A violent tremor shook the mountain. The ancient elevator mechanisms groaned, metal screeching against metal. Without warning, the cable snapped with a resounding twang. "Everybody out!" Greg shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of collapsing machinery. In a flash, Greg activated his plasma cutter, slicing through the elevator's roof. The acrid smell of melting metal filled the air as sparks showered around them. "Jump!" he yelled, propelling himself through the newly created opening. Lyra, Krell, and Dr. Chen followed in rapid succession, leaping onto a narrow ledge in the shaft, mere seconds before the elevator plummeted into the darkness below. The thunderous crash echoed through the shaft, a grim reminder of how close they had come to disaster. Catching his breath, Greg surveyed their predicament. They clung to a precarious ledge, with at least 100 meters of vertical shaft looming above them. The exit they had hoped to reach via elevator now seemed impossibly distant. "Well," Greg said, his voice steady despite the danger, "looks like we're climbing after all." He quickly assessed their resources. Between them, they had basic climbing gear, the plasma cutter, and their wits. It would have to be enough. "Dr. Chen," Greg called out, "we need to create some climbing aids from what's left of the elevator. Any ideas?" The materials scientist examined the debris scattered around them. "We can repurpose some of these metal panels," he suggested. "If we shape them right, they could serve as makeshift pitons." Greg nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. Krell, can you help secure anchor points as we go up?" The pack-led soldier's antenna twitched in affirmation. "Affirmative. My military training included vertical ascent techniques." As they prepared their improvised gear, Lyra closed her eyes, her face a mask of concentration. "I can sense energy fluctuations in the shaft," she said. "Some areas feel unstable. I can guide us around them." With their roles established, the team began their ascent. Greg took point, using his knowledge of rock formations to identify the most secure handholds. He drove the makeshift pitons into the shaft wall, creating a path for the others to follow. The climb was grueling. Every movement had to be carefully considered, each handhold tested before committing weight to it. Sweat beaded on their foreheads, muscles straining with the effort of vertical progress. Halfway up, they encountered a section of collapsed shaft wall. A gaping hole yawned before them, too wide to safely traverse. Greg's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes fell on the plasma cutter hanging at his belt. "I have an idea," he announced. "It's risky, but it might work." He explained his plan to use the plasma cutter to superheat sections of the metallic shaft wall. As the metal cooled, it would contract, potentially creating new handholds and footholds. "It's either this or turn back," Greg said, meeting each team member's eyes in turn. With no better options, they agreed to proceed. Greg activated the plasma cutter, its blue-white beam illuminating the darkness. He carefully traced a pattern across the gap, the metal glowing red-hot in its wake. As the superheated sections cooled, they watched with anxious anticipation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the metal began to warp and buckle. New protrusions formed, creating a series of crude but usable holds across the gap. "It worked," Dr. Chen exclaimed, his voice tinged with both relief and admiration. They traversed the gap carefully, testing each new hold before committing their full weight. The makeshift bridge held, allowing them to continue their ascent. As they neared the top of the shaft, a faint humming filled the air. Lyra's eyes widened. "Something's activating," she warned. "I can feel a surge of precursor energy." No sooner had the words left her mouth than a swarm of small spherical objects descended upon them. Ancient defense drones, reawakened by the energy surges, buzzed angrily around the climbers. "Defensive positions?" Krell shouted, his military training kicking in. Greg and Krell worked in tandem, swatting away drones that ventured too close. Krell's powerful, pack-led physiology allowed him to simply crush the drones with his bare hands, while Greg used his climbing gear to deflect and disable them. As they fought off the swarm, Dr. Chen focused on a disabled drone that had fallen onto a nearby ledge. His fingers flew over its surface, interfacing with its ancient systems. "If I can just—" "Yes," he exclaimed. The drone in his hands came to life, emitting a high-pitched signal. The other drones paused in their attack, suddenly confused. I've reprogrammed this one to emit a signal that should disrupt the others, Dr. Chen explained. It won't last long, but it should give us a clear path to the exit. Taking advantage of the lull, the team made a final push for the top of the shaft. With aching muscles and ragged breath, they hauled themselves over the edge and into a vast chamber beyond. As they stood taking in their new surroundings, the sight before them momentarily banished all thoughts of their harrowing climb. A massive crystalline structure dominated the center of the chamber, pulsing with energy. Holographic displays flickered around it, showing real-time data on Zephyria's deteriorating core. They had found the master control node, but their sense of triumph was short-lived. An invisible barrier shimmered around the node, preventing access. "We're so close," Greg muttered, studying the barrier. He turned to Lyra. "This energy, it's similar to what we encountered at the other nodes. Your sensitivity might be the key to bypassing it." As Lyra nodded, preparing to attempt interfacing with the barrier, Dr. Chen's communication device crackled to life. The voice of Captain Rodriguez from the HS Galileo filled the chamber, heavy with urgency. "Dr. Chen, do you read? Our sensors have detected a massive energy buildup in Zephyria's core. You have less than an hour before total planetary collapse." The gravity of the situation settled over the team like a physical weight. They exchanged determined looks, no words necessary to convey the urgency of their task. As Greg and Lyra began working on harmonizing her energy field with the barrier, Krell's attention snapped to the chamber entrance. His antennae twitched, picking up distant sounds of approach. "We have company," he announced grimly. "General Dorn's loyalists. They must have followed our trail." Greg's mind raced, acutely aware of the multiple threats converging on their position. The unstable planet, the impenetrable barrier, and now enemy forces closing in. Time was running out, and the fate of Zephyria hung in the balance. As Krell moved to defend their position, Greg and Lyra redoubled their efforts on the barrier. Sweat beaded on Lyra's forehead as she strained to align her energy with the ancient precursor technology. Suddenly, a small distortion appeared in the barrier, an opening barely large enough for a single person to pass through. "It's unstable," Lyra gasped, the effort of maintaining the opening evident in her voice. "We can't hold it for long." Greg looked from the shimmering opening to his team, then to the advancing loyalists visible now at the far end of the chamber. A crucial decision loomed before him. Who should enter the barrier to activate the master control node? The choice could mean the difference between saving Zephyria and losing everything, and whoever went through might not make it back out. Greg's mind raced as he weighed the gravity of the decision before him. With a deep breath, he stepped forward. "I'll go," he announced, his voice steady despite the tension coursing through him. "My expertise with precursor tech gives us the best shot at activating the node." Lyra's eyes widened. "But Greg," he cut her off with a shake of his head. "There's no time to argue. Dr. Chen, keep working on those displays. Krell, Lyra, hold this position. We can't let those loyalists interfere." Without waiting for a response, Greg moved towards the shimmering barrier. He could feel the energy prickling against his skin as he approached. With one last glance at his team, he stepped through. The transition was jarring. One moment he was in the vast chamber. The next he found himself in a smaller, crystalline space. The air hummed with power, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. At the center stood a control interface unlike anything he had ever seen. Greg's archaeological instincts kicked in as he approached the console. His eyes darted over the unfamiliar symbols, recognizing patterns similar to those he'd studied in precursor ruins across the galaxy. This was what he had trained for his entire career. Outside, the sounds of battle erupted. Krell's deep voice boomed orders as he coordinated their defense. Lyra moved with preternatural grace, her connection to the precursor energy allowing her to anticipate and dodge enemy fire. Greg forced himself to tune out the conflict and focus on the task at hand. He placed his hands on the console, feeling the thrum of energy beneath his palms. A series of holographic displays sprang to life around him, each more complex than the last. "Okay," he muttered to himself, "let's see what makes you tick." As Greg began to work through the activation sequence, he encountered a series of intricate failsafes. Each one required precise timing and input to bypass. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he concentrated, knowing that a single mistake could lock him out of the system entirely. A violent tremor shook the chamber, nearly causing Greg to lose his footing. He cursed under his breath, realizing that Zephyria's deteriorating core was working against him. He'd need to factor in these seismic disruptions if he wanted to complete the sequence. "Greg!" Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the comlink. "I've made a breakthrough with the displays. The node can reverse the damage, but it'll take an enormous amount of energy. It might overload the system." "Understood," Greg replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "Keep feeding me data. I'll need real-time information to complete this sequence." As Greg worked, he became increasingly aware of the battle raging outside. He could hear Krell's grunts of exertion and Lyra's sharp commands. The Loyalists were putting up a fierce fight, and Greg knew his team couldn't hold out forever. Another tremor rocked the chamber, stronger than the last. Greg stumbled, his hand slipping on the console. Alarms blared as he inadvertently triggered a security protocol. "No, no, no!" he hissed, fingers dancing across the controls to undo his mistake. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to slow down. Speed was crucial, but accuracy was paramount. Just as Greg managed to bypass another failsafe, a surge of energy caused the barrier around him to fluctuate. He turned to see a Loyalist soldier stumbling through the opening, weapon raised. Time seemed to slow. Greg locked eyes with the soldier, seeing the conflict in the man's face. In that moment of hesitation, Greg saw an opportunity. "Wait!" he called out, hands raised. "Look at the displays. The planet is dying. We're trying to save it, not destroy it." The soldier's eyes darted to the holographic readouts, widening as he took in the data. Greg could see the moment the reality of the situation sank in. What can I do?" the soldier asked, lowering his weapon. "Help me," Greg said, turning back to the console. "I need to complete this sequence, but the tremors are making it nearly impossible." The soldier moved to Greg's side, steadying him as another quake shook the chamber. With the extra support, Greg was able to focus entirely on the intricate dance of symbols and energy pulses before him. As the final pieces of the sequence fell into place, the master control node hummed to life. A pulse of energy erupted from the center, rippling outward through the precursor network. Greg watched in awe as the holographic displays showed the wave of stabilizing energy spreading across Zephyria. But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared as the node's energy levels spiked dangerously. "It's overloading," Greg shouted into his comm. "The stabilization process is too much for it." Without thinking, Greg plunged his hands into the swirling energy at the heart of the node. He cried out as the power surged through him, threatening to overwhelm his nervous system. Using every ounce of his knowledge and will, he began to manually adjust the energy distribution. The Loyalist soldier watched in horror as Greg's body convulsed, becoming a living conduit for the vast energies of the node. Outside, the fighting had ceased as both sides witnessed the visible effects of Zephyria's stabilization. Greg's vision blurred, his entire being consumed by the task of channeling and directing the node's power. He could feel his consciousness beginning to fray at the edges, but he held on. "Come on," he gritted through clenched teeth. "Just a little more." The fate of Zephyria hung in the balance, with Greg at the center of it all, locked in a desperate struggle against time and the limits of his own body, human body. His muscles burned with exertion, every nerve ending screaming in protest as he channeled the immense power of the precursor technology. Suddenly, a hand grasped his shoulder. Greg turned to see the Loyalist soldier he had convinced earlier, now standing beside him with a look of commitment. "Sergeant Vex," the man said, introducing himself. "Let me help you." Greg shook his head, his voice strained. "Too dangerous. I can't let go." But Vex wasn't deterred. He placed his hands on Greg's shoulders, bracing himself against the surge of energy. To Greg's surprise, the act seemed to create a synergy, allowing him to more effectively control the flow of power. Outside the barrier, Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "Greg, we've got a new problem. The energy output is triggering a chain reaction in Zephyria's crust. A supervolcano is about to erupt." Greg's mind raced, processing the new information. He could feel the planet's seismic activity through the precursor network, sensing the buildup of pressure beneath the surface. In a split-second decision, he began to recalibrate the energy distribution. "What are you doing?" Vex asked, his voice tight with the strain of channeling the energy. "Redirecting the excess power," Greg grunted. "If we can disperse it through the crust, we might prevent the eruption." His fingers flew over the control interface, rerouting energy flows and adjusting parameters. The chamber shook violently, pieces of the ceiling breaking loose and crashing to the floor. Outside the barrier, Krell's voice boomed over the chaos. "Defensive positions! Protect the core systems!" Greg could hear the sounds of the team scrambling to shield themselves and the vital equipment. He pushed the distractions from his mind, focusing entirely on the delicate balance of energies flowing through his body and the precursor network. Blood trickled from his nose, his vision blurring at the edges. But Greg refused to give in to the exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him. The fate of Zephyria hung in the balance. Vex tightened his grip on Greg's shoulders, lending his strength. "We're not done yet," he said through gritted teeth. "Keep going." The unexpected cooperation between human and Pakled created a powerful conduit for the precursor energy. Greg felt a surge of renewed focus, his mind clearing as he made the final adjustments to the planet's systems. The violent tremors began to subside. On the holographic displays, the angry red glow of the supervolcano faded to a more manageable orange, then yellow. "It's working!" Dr. Chen's excited voice came through the comm. "Seismic activity is decreasing across the board. The supervolcano is stabilizing." Greg allowed himself a small smile of relief, but he knew the job wasn't finished. With careful precision, he initiated the final sequence to lock in Zephyria's stabilized state. A pulse of energy rippled through the precursor network, more powerful than anything they had experienced before. Greg and Vex held on, their bodies shaking with the effort of channeling the massive surge. As the pulse faded, the energy barrier around them flickered and disappeared. Greg felt the connection to the precursor technology slip away, and with it went the last of his strength. His knees buckled, and he began to fall. Vex caught him before he hit the ground, lowering him gently to the floor. The rest of the team rushed in, Dr. Chen immediately kneeling beside Greg to check his vital signs. "He's alive, but barely," Chen reported, his fingers pressed against Greg's neck. "We need to get him to advanced medical facilities immediately." As Krell carefully lifted Greg's unconscious form, Lyra gasped, pointing at the holographic displays. "Look!" The screen showed a planet-wide transformation taking place. The toxic atmosphere was clearing at an astonishing rate, and long-dormant precursor structures were emerging from beneath Zephyria's surface. "It's incredible," Dr. Chen breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "The stabilization process didn't just save the planet, it's revealed an entire network of hidden precursor sites." Captain Rodriguez's voice came through their comms, filled with urgency. "Dr. Chen, we're picking up massive energy fluctuations across the planet's surface. What's your status?" As Chen began to explain the situation, Krell carried Greg towards the chamber's exit, with Lyra and Vex following close behind. The immediate crisis had passed, but Greg's condition remained critical. Outside the ancient precursor facility, they were met by a team of medics who had been standing by. As they loaded Greg onto a stretcher, Lyra turned to Vex, her expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping him, for helping all of us." Vex nodded solemnly. "I just hope it's enough, for him and for Zephyria." As the medical team rushed Greg to a waiting transport, the rest of the group paused to take in the transformed landscape around them. The sky, once choked with toxic gases, was gradually clearing, revealing glimpses of stars above. In the distance, the silhouette of a massive precursor structure was emerging from beneath the ground, its purpose yet unknown. Dr. Chen's comm device buzzed with incoming reports from across the planet. Teams of scientists and explorers were already mobilizing to investigate the newly revealed precursor sites. The implications of their discovery were staggering, promising to reshape the future of both human and Pakled societies. But as they boarded the transport that would take them to the orbital medical station, their thoughts remained with Greg. His sacrifice had saved a world and uncovered wonders beyond imagination. Now they could only hope that the same advanced technology he had helped unlock might be able to save him in return. The transport lifted off, carrying them towards an uncertain future filled with both promise and peril. As Zephyria fell away beneath them, the true scope of their achievement and the challenges that lay ahead began to dawn on the weary team. As the transport ascended through the thinning atmosphere, Dr. Chen's comm device buzzed urgently. "Captain Rodriguez here. We've received your emergency transmission. What's Greg's status?" Chen glanced at Greg's pale, motionless form. "Critical, Captain. We need advanced medical care immediately." "Understood. I've contacted the Pakled authorities. They're preparing their best medical facility in the capital. We'll rendezvous there." Chen nodded, then turned to the others. "We need to stabilize him for transport. Lyra, Krell, help me set up a makeshift stasis pod." Working swiftly, they combined Pakled and human medical technology, creating a cocoon of energy fields and life support systems around Greg. Vex watched in fascination, offering assistance where he could. As they worked, a low rumble vibrated through the transport. Lyra rushed to the viewport, her eyes widening. "Look!" Below them, the mountain that housed the precursor chamber was transforming. Sections of rock split apart, revealing a network of gleaming tunnels and sleek, cylindrical structures. "It's some kind of transportation system," Chen marveled. "The energy pulse must have activated it." The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "New orders from ground control. We're to land and use the precursor system. It's our fastest route to the capital." Minutes later, they were racing through the mountain's interior, their transport cradled in a high-speed elevator. The walls blurred past, occasionally opening to reveal breathtaking vistas of Zephyria's transforming landscape. They emerged from the mountain base into a city alive with activity. Pakled of all ranks rushed about, their usual stoic demeanor replaced by a mix of excitement and apprehension. A medical team was waiting as the transport touched down. "This way," a Pakled doctor gestured urgently. "We've prepared our most advanced facility." They rushed through the streets, Greg's stasis pod floating between them. Pakled civilians stopped to stare, murmuring amongst themselves as they recognized the heroes who had saved their world. Inside the medical center, human and Pakled staff worked side by side, quickly adapting equipment to suit human physiology. Dr. Chen oversaw the transfer of Greg's pod to a permanent life support system, his fingers flying over unfamiliar controls. "How is he?" Lyra asked, her voice tight with worry. Chen shook his head. "Stable, but barely. The energy exposure caused unprecedented changes to his cellular structure. We're in uncharted territory here." Captain Rodriguez strode in, her uniform dusty from the planet's surface. "The HSS Galileo has landed nearby. We're setting up a command center to coordinate with the new Pakled government." "New government?" Krell rumbled in surprise. Rodriguez nodded. "General Dorn's loyalists have been ousted. The moderates are in control now, and they're eager to work with us." As if on cue, a group of Pakled officials entered, led by a tall, distinguished-looking individual. "I am Regent Kraz," he announced. "On behalf of the Pakled people, I extend our deepest gratitude for your actions. We wish to begin formal alliance negotiations immediately." Rodriguez stepped forward to greet him, but Chen interrupted. "Captain, we have another situation. Look at these readings." On a nearby screen, images of Greg's brain activity flashed, showing patterns unlike anything they'd seen before. Chen pointed to another display, showing a cellular scan. "His body is changing at the molecular level. It's as if the precursor energy has triggered some kind of evolution." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Regent Kraz was the first to speak. "Perhaps the answers lie in the precursor sites. Our sensors show structures emerging all across the planet." Rodriguez nodded. "Agreed. Dr. Chen, continue monitoring Greg's condition. I'll assemble a team to begin exploring the nearest site." As they discussed plans, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the windows, they could see ships descending through the clearing atmosphere, ships of unfamiliar design. "Captain," a voice crackled over Rodriguez's comm, "we're detecting multiple vessels entering the system. They're not human or Pakled." Rodriguez's expression hardened. "Looks like we've attracted some attention. Regent Kraz, we may need to accelerate our alliance discussions." As the group dispersed to handle the growing crisis, Chen turned back to Greg's lifeless form. The monitors beeped steadily, tracking the mysterious changes occurring within his body. Chen leaned close, whispering, "Hang in there, Greg. We still need you." Outside, the skies of Zephyria continued to clear, revealing a world transformed. New precursor structures gleamed in the distance, promising untold discoveries. And in orbit above, the gathering of alien ships hinted at the challenges to come. The future of Zephyria, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. Balance. The future of Zephyria, and perhaps the galaxy itself, hung in the air as the team watched the alien ships descend through the planet's atmosphere. Back in the medical facility, the steady beep of monitors filled the air as Dr. Chen hovered over Greg's unconscious form. His fingers flew across holographic displays, tracking the unprecedented changes occurring within Greg's body. "Cellular regeneration off the charts," Chen muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Neural activity patterns. I've never seen anything like this." A nearby console chimed, drawing Chen's attention. His eyes widened as he observed Greg's brainwaves fluctuating in perfect synchronization with the precursor technology scattered throughout the room. "Fascinating," he breathed. "It's as if his mind is forming a direct connection with the ancient systems." Outside the medical bay, the corridors buzzed with activity. Human and Pakled staff rushed back and forth, their voices a mix of excitement and apprehension. Captain Rodriguez strode purposefully through the organized chaos, her comm unit chirping incessantly. "Yes, I understand the urgency," she said, her voice taut with tension. "Assemble the team immediately. We need to get eyes on that precursor structure." Minutes later, Lyra, Krell, and Sergeant Vex gathered in the launch bay alongside two human scientists, Dr. Ilara Voss and Dr. Alex Chen. They loaded their equipment onto a modified Pakled transport, its hull reinforced to withstand Zephyria's unstable terrain. As the bay doors slid open, revealing the transformed landscape of the Pakled capital, Lyra gasped. The once familiar skyline was now dotted with gleaming precursor structures, their surfaces pulsing with ethereal light. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Krell grunted in agreement, his massive frame dwarfing the others as they boarded the transport. "Beautiful, yes, but potentially dangerous. We must remain vigilant." The vehicle hummed to life, its engines thrumming with a combination of Pakled and human technology. As they navigated through the city streets, they encountered a growing crowd of protesters, both human and Pakled, their faces etched with fear and anger. "Go back to your own world," one Pakled shouted, his fist raised in defiance. "Stop meddling with forces you don't understand," a human voice added from the crowd. The transport pushed forward, protected by a security detail provided by the interim Pakled government. Sergeant Vex watched the protesters with a mixture of understanding and drive. "Change is never easy," he said, his voice low, "but it's necessary for growth." As they left the city behind, the landscape grew wilder. The terrain undulated beneath them, still settling from the massive geological shifts triggered by their actions in the master control node. In the distance, a massive pyramid-like structure loomed, half buried in a mountain range. Dr. Voss leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "There it is, one of the newly emerged precursor sites." As they approached, the structure's surface began to pulse with intricate patterns of light, responding to their presence. The team quickly established a base camp, unloading their equipment with practiced efficiency. Dr. Voss moved to a section of rock near the base of the structure, her hands running over the rough surface. "The entrance mechanism should be here." With a series of precise movements, she activated a hidden panel. The ground trembled as massive doors began to slide open, revealing a vast, dark interior. "Incredible," Dr. Chen breathed, adjusting his pack. "Shall we?" The team entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. As they ventured deeper, the walls came alive with soft, pulsing light, illuminating their path. In the central chamber, they discovered a holographic interface similar to the one in the master control node. Dr. Voss approached it, her fingers hovering over the controls. "Here goes nothing," she murmured, activating the system. The air shimmered as a three-dimensional map of the galaxy burst into existence above them. Scattered across the star systems, several points glowed brightly. Other precursor sites? Lyra asked, her voice filled with wonder. Before anyone could respond, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Ancient mechanisms whirred to life, and robotic guardians emerged from hidden alcoves, their metallic forms gleaming in the dim light. "Defensive systems!" Krell shouted, drawing his weapon. "Take cover!" Chaos erupted as the team scrambled for safety. Krell and Vex moved in perfect sync, years of military training evident in their fluid motions. They provided cover fire as the others retreated to a more defensible position. Lyra closed her eyes, reaching out with her newfound sensitivity to precursor energy. "This way," she called, guiding them through a maze of corridors to a small protected alcove. As they caught their breath, Dr. Chen activated his comm unit. "Base camp, do you copy? We're cut off. Repeat, we are cut off." Static filled the air, broken only by the distant sounds of the Guardian robots searching for them. The team exchanged worried glances, realizing they were trapped deep within the ancient structure, their mission hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, back at the medical facility, Greg's eyes snapped open. The monitors around him came to life, interfaces activating without any physical interaction. As he sat up, his mind buzzed with an overwhelming influx of information. He could sense every piece of precursor technology in the vicinity, understanding its purpose and function instinctively. Dr. Chen rushed to his side, his face a mixture of relief and astonishment. "Greg, you're awake. How do you feel?" Greg's voice was hoarse as he replied, his eyes distant. "Connected. I can feel the systems. All of them." Before Dr. Chen could respond, Captain Rodriguez burst into the room. "Greg, thank goodness you're conscious. We have a situation." She quickly briefed him on the expedition team's predicament and the rising tensions in orbit. Greg nodded, his newfound abilities already reaching out to the precursor systems across the planet. "I can help," he said, his voice growing stronger. "Get me a secure link to the team. I'll guide them out." As Greg focused his mind on the distant precursor structure, the medical facility hummed with energy. Across Zephyria, long-dormant systems began to awaken, responding to his mental commands. In orbit, the standoff between the human Packlet Alliance and the newly arrived archivers grew tenser by the moment. The fate of Zephyria, and perhaps the entire galaxy, now rested on a knife's edge, with Greg's evolving abilities and the expedition team's discoveries at the center of the brewing storm. As Greg's consciousness expanded, the medical facility around him thrummed with a palpable energy. Monitors flickered and beeped erratically, struggling to keep pace with the unprecedented changes occurring within his body. Dr. Chen stepped back, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and concern. "Greg, your vitals are off the charts. What's happening?" Greg's voice came out distant, as if speaking from across a vast chasm. "I can feel them all, Doctor. Every precursor system on the planet. They're awakening." As he spoke, the floor beneath him trembled. Outside, the newly emerged precursor structures pulsed with an eerie blue light, their dormant systems stirring to life after millennia of slumber. Captain Rodriguez burst into the room, her comm unit buzzing with urgent transmissions. "Greg, we need your help. Our team is trapped in one of the precursor sites, and we've got a situation brewing in orbit." Greg nodded, his eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. "I can guide them out. Get me a secure link." As Rodriguez worked to establish the connection, Greg's mind reached out across the planet. He could sense the expedition team's predicament, their fear and grit echoing through the ancient corridors. Inside the precursor structure, Lyra, Krell, and the others huddled in their alcove, the sounds of searching Guardian robots growing closer. Suddenly, Lyra's comm unit crackled to life. "This is Greg. I can see you. Follow my instructions, and I'll lead you to safety." Relief washed over the team as Greg's voice guided them through a maze of shifting corridors. Walls moved at his mental command, creating new paths and sealing off others to protect the team from the pursuing Guardians. As they navigated the structure, Dr. Voss's eyes widened at the data streaming across her handheld device. "This is incredible," she breathed. "The structure is reconfiguring itself into some kind of defensive formation." Sergeant Vex's expression hardened. "We need to move faster. If this place goes into full lockdown, We could be trapped inside. Following Greg's guidance, the team pushed forward, downloading crucial data as they went. They emerged from the structure just as its massive doors began to seal shut behind them. Back in orbit, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Captain Elena Chen of the HSS Galileo watched as the Archiver fleet deployed a series of probes towards Zephiria's surface. "Intercept those probes," she ordered, her voice steady despite the tension. "We can't let them interfere with the planet's defenses." The Galileo's weapon systems came online, targeting the incoming probes. As the first shots were fired, Chen knew she had just initiated humanity's first direct conflict with the Archivers. On the planet's surface, chaos reigned. Prime Minister Zorn, newly appointed leader of the interim Pakled government, struggled to maintain order as reports flooded in from across Zephyria. Ancient machines erupted from the ground, energy fields shimmered over cities, and strange signals pulsed into space. In the medical facility, Greg's body continued to change. Intricate circuit-like patterns etched themselves across his skin, and his eyes glowed with an intense blue light. As he interfaced with the planet's systems, he became aware of something vast and ancient stirring deep within Zephiria's core. "There's an AI," he gasped, his voice strained. "It's been dormant for millennia. It's communicating with me." Dr. Chen leaned in, fascination overriding his concern. "What's it saying?" Greg's eyes darted back and forth, processing the flood of information. Zephyria was a hub, part of a galactic defense network. The precursors built it to protect against some kind of threat they foresaw. As Greg spoke, Captain Rodriguez's comm unit chimed with an urgent message. "Captain, long-range sensors have detected a massive object moving towards our system at incredible speed." Rodriguez's face paled. The awakening of Zephiria's defenses must have attracted attention. We need to prepare for whatever's coming. Greg's eyes suddenly focused, his mind latching onto a crucial piece of information. "There's a master control facility," he said, his voice growing stronger. "Deep beneath Zephiria's largest ocean. If we can access it, we'll have full control over all precursor systems on the planet." Captain Rodriguez nodded, her mind racing with the implications. "We'll need to assemble a team immediately, but first, we have to deal with the Archivers and this new threat." As if in response to her words, the medical facility shook violently. Outside, the sky lit up with the flashes of orbital combat as the HSS Galileo engaged the Archiver fleet. Greg's voice cut through the chaos, filled with a newfound certainty. "We don't have much time. The key to Zephiria's defenses lies in that underwater facility. We have to reach it before it's too late." As alarms blared and the ground trembled beneath them, the assembled humans and Pakleds faced a moment of truth. The fate of Zephyria, and perhaps the entire galaxy, now rested in their hands. With the Archivers attacking from orbit, an unknown entity approaching from deep space, and the planet itself undergoing a massive transformation, they would have to act fast to unravel the secrets of the precursors and harness the true power of Zephyria. Zephiria's ancient power. As the implications of Greg's words sank in, the medical facility shuddered again, the tremors growing more intense. Greg's body suddenly arched off the bed, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly blue light. The circuit-like patterns on his skin pulsed and spread, covering more of his body with each passing second. Dr. Chen stumbled back, his equipment beeping wildly as it struggled to keep up with the rapid changes in Greg's physiology. "We need to stabilize him," Dr. Chen shouted over the din of alarms and rumbling earth. But as the medical staff approached, an invisible force field shimmered into existence around Greg's bed, keeping them at bay. Captain Rodriguez's comm unit crackled to life. "Rodriguez, this is Captain Elena Chen of the HSS Galileo. We're under heavy fire from the Archiver fleet. Our defenses are holding for now, but we're outnumbered. What's your status?" Before Rodriguez could respond, Greg's voice cut through the chaos, unnaturally calm and resonant. "Captain Chen, I'm transmitting critical information to you now." In orbit, Captain Chen watched in awe as a holographic map of Zephyria materialized on the Galileo's bridge. A pulsing marker indicated the location of an underwater facility deep beneath the planet's largest ocean. "That's our target," Greg's voice echoed through the ship's comm system. The Master Control Facility. It's the key to harnessing Zephyria's full power. Chen's tactical mind raced through the implications. Understood. I'm assembling a team for immediate deployment. On the planet's surface, the expedition team led by Dr. Alara Voss emerged from the precursor structure, only to find the world around them in chaos. The ground heaved and buckled as massive machines erupted from beneath, their ancient forms gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Sergeant Vex's military training kicked in as he surveyed the scene. We need to get back to the capital immediately. Dr. Voss, any insights on what we're dealing with here? Voss's eyes were glued to her datapad, fingers flying over the surface as she analyzed the incoming information. It's incredible. The entire planet is reconfiguring itself into some kind of defensive formation, but it's not complete yet. As if to emphasize her point, a colossal war machine burst from the ground nearby, its towering form casting a shadow over the team. Panicked civilians fled in all directions, their screams piercing the air. "Everyone, stay calm," Vex shouted, his voice carrying over the din. "Follow me to safety." He began guiding the civilians away from the war machine, his years of combat experience evident in his swift, decisive movements. Krell and Lyra exchanged a glance before springing into action. "We'll draw its attention," Krell growled, unslinging his weapon. Lyra nodded, her newfound connection to precursor energy humming beneath her skin. As Vex led the civilians to safety, Krell and Lyra worked in tandem to distract the war machine. Krell's precise shots pinged off its armored hide, while Lyra focused her energy, causing nearby precursor tech to flare and spark erratically. The war machine's sensors, overwhelmed by the conflicting inputs, swiveled in confusion. Back in the medical facility, Greg's transformation continued unabated. His consciousness expanded, connecting with precursor systems across the planet. Through this vast network, he sensed a new presence entering the system, a colossal ship of unmistakably precursor design. "Captain Chen," Greg's voice resonated through the Galileo's comm system once more. "A precursor ship has entered the system. It contains the last survivors of their civilization, preserved in stasis for millions of years." Chen's eyes widened at the implications. "Understood. We'll hold off on any aggressive actions until we can assess their intentions." In the depths of Zephyria's largest ocean, Commander Jack Morrison led his team in a modified Pakled submersible. The vessel creaked and groaned under the immense pressure as they descended towards the master control facility. "Keep an eye on those pressure readings," Morrison instructed his team. "We're pushing this submersible to its limits." Suddenly, the ocean around them lit up with pulsing energy fields. Ancient security systems, dormant for millennia, sprang to life. The submersible rocked as it was caught in a powerful current, forcing Morrison to wrestle with the controls. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "We're not leaving here without accessing that facility." As the underwater team fought their way through the planet's defenses, the situation on the surface continued to escalate. Prime Minister Zorn's voice boomed across emergency channels, declaring a planet-wide state of emergency. In the Pakled capital, Dr. Voss and her team arrived, immediately immersing themselves in the flood of data from the precursor structure. Working alongside human and Pakled scientists, they began to unravel the true nature of Zephyria's transformation. "This is unprecedented," Voss muttered, her eyes scanning rapidly over streams of information. "The planet isn't just defending itself, it's becoming mobile, a fortress capable of traversing space." As the scientists worked feverishly to understand Zephyria's metamorphosis, Greg's connection to the planet's systems deepened. He found himself able to exert control over the emerging precursor machines, directing them to assist in evacuation efforts and minimize damage to populated areas. In orbit, the massive precursor ship loomed ever closer, its presence causing a temporary lull in the battle between the human Pakled alliance and the Archiver fleet. All eyes turned to this new arrival, uncertainty hanging heavy in the vacuum of space. Commander Morrison's submersible neared the underwater facility, its sensors detecting a surge of energy from within. "The control center is activating on its own," he reported, his voice tense. "We need to get in there now, before it unleashes something we can't control." As the submersible made its final approach, the water around them began to churn and glow with an otherworldly light. The master control facility was awakening, its ancient systems powering up after eons of dormancy. With the underwater team racing against time, the precursor ship advancing, and Greg's transformation reaching a critical point, the fate of Zephyria hung in the balance. The next few moments would determine not just the future of this planet, but potentially the course of galactic history itself. As the underwater team raced towards the master control facility, the submersible suddenly lurched, caught in a powerful current. Commander Morrison gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles turning white as he fought to maintain their course. "Energy readings off the charts!" shouted Lieutenant Reyes, her eyes glued to the sensor display. "We're approaching some kind of barrier." Morrison's heart made as he spotted the shimmering wall of energy blocking their path. "I see it. Scan for weak points. There's got to be a way through." The submersible's sensors swept the barrier, revealing fluctuations in its intensity. Morrison's eyes narrowed as he spotted a series of underwater canyons leading towards the facility. "There," he pointed. "We'll use the terrain as cover. Strap in, people. This is going to be a rough ride." The submersible dove into the maze of canyons, weaving between towering underwater cliffs. Energy tendrils from the barrier lashed out, barely missing them as Morrison expertly maneuvered through the treacherous terrain. Back on the surface, the medical facility shook violently as Greg's transformation intensified. His body levitated off the bed, surrounded by a pulsing blue aura. Dr. Chen, watching from a safe distance, barked orders into his comm unit. "Evacuate the entire floor now. We can't contain this energy." As medical staff and patients rushed to safety, Greg's consciousness expanded, connecting with precursor systems across the planet. Through this vast network, he sensed the approach of the colossal precursor ship entering the system. In orbit, Captain Elena Chen of the HSS Galileo watched as the massive vessel loomed closer. Static crackled across communication channels as the ship's presence disrupted both human and Pakled systems. "Initiate emergency protocols," Chen ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Maintain links with ground forces and Morrison's team at all costs." No sooner had she given the order than the Archiver fleet regrouped, launching a second wave of attacks. Energy beams pierced Zephyr's atmosphere, targeting the emerging precursor defenses on the surface. On the ground, Dr. Alara Voss and her team huddled around a holodisplay, frantically analyzing data from the precursor structure. Voss's eyes widened as a sequence of symbols flashed across the screen. "These are activation codes," she breathed. "They could give us control over the planet's defense grid." Her excitement quickly faded as she realized the implications. But they require a direct neural interface with precursor systems. Right now, only Greg Coleman can do that. As Voss and her team grappled with this discovery, Prime Minister Zorn's voice boomed over emergency channels, declaring a planet-wide mobilization. Human and Pakled soldiers flooded the streets of major cities, working together to maintain order and prepare for potential Archiver attacks. Beneath the churning ocean, Commander Morrison's submersible finally breached the energy barrier. They approached a massive structure looming in the darkness, its ancient contours barely visible in the murky water. "There," Morrison pointed. "An airlock. Let's hope this thing still works after millions of years." To their surprise, the airlock activated as they approached, allowing them to dock. The team entered the facility with weapons drawn, finding themselves in a vast chamber filled with dormant precursor technology. In orbit, the situation grew even more tense as the precursor ship began powering up a massive energy weapon. Captain Chen, recognizing the potential devastation, made a difficult decision. "Divert half our forces from Zephyr's defense," she ordered. "We need to establish communication with that ship before they fire." As the Galileo changed course, Greg Coleman's consciousness reached out, connecting with Commander Morrison's team in the underwater facility. Morrison stumbled, a sudden flood of information filling his mind. "It's Greg," he gasped, regaining his footing. "He's guiding us. This way." The team followed Morrison through a maze of corridors, trusting in Greg's mental link to lead them to the central control room. On the planet's surface, chaos reigned as entire continents began to shift. Buildings crumbled and chasms opened in the earth as Zephyr's transformation accelerated. Prime Minister Zorn coordinated with human pack-led crisis teams, struggling to manage evacuations as the ground literally moved beneath their feet. In the capital, Dr. Voss's team made a startling discovery. "It's not just a defensive platform," Voss announced, her voice filled with awe. "Zephyria is becoming a starship, one capable of interstellar travel." As this revelation sent shockwaves through the human and pack-led leadership, Commander Morrison's team reached the heart of the underwater facility. A massive crystalline structure dominated the center of the room, pulsing with ethereal energy. Morrison approached cautiously, and the crystal reacted to his presence. A holographic interface materialized, filled with complex precursor symbols. As he reached out to touch it, the facility rumbled ominously. In orbit, the precursor ship's weapon reached full power. Captain Chen, her attempts at communication unsuccessful, braced for impact. The human pack-led fleet formed a defensive line, uncertain if they could withstand such a massive attack. On Zephyria's surface, natural disasters compounded the chaos of the planet's reconfiguration. Earthquakes toppled buildings, while massive tsunamis threatened coastal regions. Human and pack-led forces fought against both the elements and malfunctioning precursor machines, desperately trying to protect panicked civilians. In the medical facility, Greg Coleman's physical form levitated, surrounded by a swirling vortex of blue energy. His consciousness expanded to encompass the entire precursor network on Zephyria, accessing the sum total of their ancient knowledge. In that moment of full integration, Greg understood the true purpose of Zephyria and the approaching precursor ship. The hope of the universe hung in the balance, and he alone held the key to averting disaster. As Commander Morrison's hand hovered over the crystalline interface, Greg's voice echoed in his mind. "Wait, there's something you need to know." The underwater facility trembled. Zephyria continued its transformation, and the precursor ship's weapon prepared to fire. The next moments would determine the course of the conflict and the future of human-alien relations in the galaxy. "Wait, there's something you need to know?" Greg's voice echoed in Morrison's mind, halting his hand just inches from the crystalline interface. In that instant, a surge of blue energy pulsed through the facility, emanating from Greg's consciousness. The underwater structure hummed to life, dormant systems awakening after eons of silence. Morrison stumbled back, steadying himself against a console as the floor beneath him vibrated with newfound power. "Commander, look!" Lieutenant Reyes pointed at the crystal. Its surface rippled like water, displaying a cascade of precursor symbols. Morrison's eyes widened as understanding flooded his mind, courtesy of Greg's mental link. "It's a activation sequence," he said, his fingers dancing over the holographic interface with unexpected precision. "We're bringing the whole system online." As Morrison's team worked to activate the facility, Greg's physical form in the medical center pulsed with intensifying energy. Dr. Chen, watching from behind a protective barrier, gasped as the blue aura surrounding Greg began to emit waves of energy that interfaced directly with the building's structure. Alarms blared throughout the facility as Greg's energy pulses spread across Zephyria's surface. But instead of causing more destruction, they had the opposite effect. The violent geological shifts began to stabilize, tectonic plates settling into new configurations. Prime Minister Zorn, coordinating evacuation efforts from a mobile command center, received a flurry of reports from across the planet. "The earthquakes are subsiding," an aide announced, disbelief evident in her voice. "Coastal regions report tsunami waves receding." In orbit, Captain Elena Chen of the HSS Galileo faced a critical decision as the massive precursor ship loomed ever closer, its weapon systems fully charged. Her tactical officer shouted over the din of battle alerts, "Captain, we're receiving a data burst from the planet's surface. It's coming from Greg Coleman." Chen's eyes narrowed as she scanned the incoming information. Complex codes and schematics flashed across her console, their meaning clear thanks to Greg's mental translation. Without hesitation, she made her choice. "Transmit this data to the precursor vessel, all frequencies," Chen ordered, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "And get me a direct line to that ship." As the transmission beamed out from the Galileo, the precursor vessel's weapon systems powered down. A collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge. only to be cut short as the Archiver fleet seized what they saw as an opportunity to strike. Energy beams lanced out from the Archiver ships, targeting Zephyria's orbital defenses. But before they could impact, a shimmering energy barrier materialized around the planet. The Archiver weapons splashed harmlessly against the shield, dissipating in brilliant flashes of light. On the planet's surface, Dr. Alara Voss and her team worked feverishly to analyze the flood of new data pouring in from the activated precursor systems. Her eyes widened as she decoded a particular sequence of symbols. "This is incredible," she breathed, turning to her colleagues. "Zephyria isn't just becoming a starship. It's a hub for a network of stable wormholes. This could connect all known precursor sites across the galaxy." As this revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community, Prime Minister Zorn received an urgent communication from his military advisors. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures beneath the oceans. Something's rising to the surface." Zorn watched in awe as colossal structures emerged from Zephyria's seas, their sleek designs unmistakably precursor in origin. These platforms ascended into low orbit, seamlessly integrating with the human and Pack-led defense fleets. In the underwater facility, Commander Morrison completed the final sequence of the activation process. The entire structure shuddered as vast engines, hidden deep within the planet's crust, roared to life. Morrison's team braced themselves as the facility's viewports revealed a startling sight. The ocean floor was shifting, reconfiguring to accommodate Zephyria's newfound mobility. Aboard the Galileo, Captain Chen received an incoming transmission from the precursor ship. The message, broadcast in an ancient language, filled the bridge with haunting, melodic tones. Before her linguist could begin decoding, Greg's voice came through the comm system, translating in real time. "They're not here to attack," Greg explained, his voice resonating with newfound knowledge. "They're the last survivors of the precursor civilization, awakening to find their fail-safe systems activated." As Greg conveyed this information, his consciousness expanded further, accessing the vast repository of precursor knowledge stored within Zephyria's systems. The true nature of the conflict became clear to him. "Captain," Greg continued, his voice tight with urgency, "the Archivers aren't what we thought. They're not custodians of precursor knowledge. They're a fail-safe measure, created to prevent their technology from falling into unprepared hands." This revelation cast the entire conflict in a new light. Chen quickly grasped the implications. "We need to open a dialogue immediately, with everyone." As Chen began preparations for an emergency summit aboard the Galileo, the precursor ship made its move. A massive tractor beam activated, enveloping the Archiver fleet and holding it in place. The sudden cessation of hostilities created a tense stillness in the space around Zephyria. Greg, his consciousness now spanning the entire precursor network on the planet, established direct communication with the awakened precursors. He quickly brought them up to speed on the current situation, including the human Pack-led alliance and the threat posed by the Archivers. In the medical facility, Greg's physical body underwent another transformation. The blue energy surrounding him coalesced, forming a protective cocoon. Medical staff watched in amazement as his vital signs stabilized, even as his brainwave patterns showed unprecedented levels of activity. As preparations for the summit began, Commander Morrison's team continued to explore the vast underwater facility. They uncovered chambers filled with advanced technology, including medical equipment that held the potential to unravel the mysteries of Greg's condition. On the surface, human and Pack-led forces worked side by side, providing aid to those affected by Zephyria's transformation. Their cooperation, forged in the crucible of cosmic events, stood as a testament to the potential for interspecies unity. As the plot point concludes, all eyes turn to the impending summit aboard the HSS Galileo. The fate of Zephyria, the future of precursor technology, and the balance of power in the galaxy hang in the balance. Greg Coleman, his consciousness now intricately linked with the planet's systems, prepares to play a crucial role in the negotiations, armed with the knowledge and power of an ancient civilization. As the gravity of the situation settled over the assembled delegates, Captain Elena Chen's voice cut through the tension. We have a unique opportunity here, she said, addressing the diverse group gathered in the Galileo's converted cargo bay. Let's not squander it. The makeshift conference room buzzed with activity as representatives from Earth, the Pack-led Alliance, the newly awakened precursors, and the reluctant archivers took their seats. The air was thick with anticipation and unease, each faction eyeing the others warily. Prime Minister Zorn of the Pack-led Alliance leaned towards Captain Chen, his voice low. "This is unprecedented," he murmured, "the fate of multiple civilizations hanging in the balance." Chen nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "And we're the ones who have to navigate it," she replied, her tone resolute. As the last of the delegates settled into their seats, a shimmer of blue energy coalesced at the head of the conference table. Greg Coleman's holographic form materialized, his presence bridging the gap between the physical and virtual realms. "Thank you all for coming," Greg began, his voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "We stand at a crossroads of galactic importance." As Greg spoke, the delegates listened intently, their expressions a mix of awe and apprehension. He outlined the true nature of the archivers, revealing their role as a fail-safe mechanism rather than the rightful inheritors of precursor technology. The archiver representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their earlier bravado replaced by uncertainty. One of them, a tall, spindly being with iridescent skin, stood up abruptly. This cannot be," the archiver sputtered, its multifaceted eyes darting around the room. "We have safeguarded the precursor legacy for eons." Greg's holographic form turned to face the archiver. "Your purpose was noble," he said, his voice tinged with empathy. "But it was based on an incomplete understanding. The precursors never intended for their knowledge to remain locked away forever." As Greg continued to explain, the precursor delegates exchanged knowing glances. The oldest among them, a being with skin like polished silver, leaned forward. "We created the archivers in our final days," the precursor explained, its voice a melodic whisper that nonetheless carried throughout the room. "Our civilization was collapsing, and we feared our technology falling into unprepared hands. But we always hoped that one day, a species would arise worthy of our legacy." The human and pack-led representatives listened intently, the weight of this revelation settling over them. Captain Chen cleared her throat. "And you believe we might be that species?" she asked, her voice steady despite the enormity of the question. The precursor's silver eyes seemed to shimmer. "Your alliance, forged in the face of cosmic events, shows promise. But there is much to consider." As the summit continued, tensions ebbed and flowed. The human pack-led alliance argued passionately for responsible development and sharing of precursor knowledge, citing their successful cooperation on Zephyria as evidence of their readiness. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, the joint human pack-led forces worked tirelessly to stabilize affected areas. Emergency response teams, now equipped with newly discovered precursor technology, moved through the landscape with purpose. In one particularly hard-hit region, a human engineer named Sarah Takata worked alongside her pack-led counterpart, Grohl. They carefully maneuvered a precursor device that looked like a cross between a tuning fork and a supercomputer. "Careful," Sarah cautioned as they approached a massive fissure in the ground. "We don't want to trigger another gravity fluctuation." Grohl nodded, his three-fingered hands steady on the controls. "Agreed. These anti-gravity zones are most inconvenient." As if on cue, the ground beneath them shimmered, and Sarah felt her feet leave the earth. She quickly activated her magnetic boots, a recent adaptation to the challenging conditions. "Hold on," she called to Grohl, extending a tether. "Let's complete this stabilization sequence before things get any weirder." Back aboard the Galileo, the summit reached a critical juncture as the archivers made their unexpected proposal. The room fell silent as the implications of their offer sank in. "You would share your database?" Captain Chen asked, her eyes narrowing. "In exchange for oversight of its distribution?" The lead archiver nodded, its iridescent skin rippling. "We have cataloged precursor technology for millennia. Our knowledge could be invaluable." Greg's holographic form flickered slightly, his expression thoughtful. "This changes the dynamics of our discussion significantly," he said, his voice echoing with the weight of precursor knowledge. We must consider the potential benefits against the risks of centralizing such power. As the delegates debated the archiver's proposal, Greg's consciousness expanded, reaching out to the underwater facility where Commander Morrison's team worked feverishly to revive a preserved precursor scientist. In the stasis pod chamber, Morrison watched anxiously as his team carefully initiated the revival process. The pod hummed to life, its opaque surface clearing to reveal the form of a precursor being. "Vital signs are stabilizing," reported Lieutenant Reyes, her eyes fixed on a holographic display of alien biosignatures. "Neural activity is increasing." Morrison leaned in, his heart racing. "This could change everything," he murmured, watching as the precursor's eyes began to flutter. As the summit aboard the Galileo continued, the fate of multiple civilizations hung in the balance. Greg Coleman, his consciousness bridging the gap between ancient knowledge and current events, prepared to present his comprehensive plan for moving forward. The conference room fell silent as Greg's holographic form seemed to grow more substantial. All eyes turned to him, waiting for the words that could shape the future of the galaxy. "We stand at a crossroads," Greg began, his voice resonating with newfound authority. "The path we choose here will echo through the stars for generations to come. Let me outline a proposal that I believe offers the best chance for a peaceful and prosperous future for all our peoples." As Greg spoke, the delegates leaned forward, hanging on every word. The future of human-alien relations, the distribution of precursor technology, and the balance of power in the galaxy all rested on what would happen next in this converted cargo bay aboard the HSS Galileo. Galileo. The delegates held their breath, anticipating Greg's proposal that could reshape the future of interstellar relations. As Greg opened his mouth to speak, his holographic form flickered violently. The conference room's monitors suddenly lit up with a cascade of data streams, displaying real-time information from Zephyria's systems. The delegates murmured in confusion and concern. "What's happening?" Captain Chen demanded, rising from her seat. Greg's image stabilized, his eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. "Zephyria's transformation is complete," he announced, his voice resonating with newfound power. "The planet is now fully operational as a mobile fortress." As if to punctuate his words, a low rumble reverberated through the Galileo. The view screens shifted to show the planet's surface, where massive engines embedded in the crust ignited, sending tremors across the landscape. On Zephyria, Sarah Takeda and Grohl found themselves in the midst of chaos. The ground beneath them lurched, nearly toppling their precursor device. "Grohl, stabilize the anti-grav field," Sarah shouted over the din of alarms and rumbling earth. The Packwood engineer's fingers flew over the controls, his face a mask of concentration. "Working on it," he called back. "These new pockets of weightlessness are expanding faster than anticipated." Around them, other human Packwood teams scrambled to secure equipment and evacuate civilians from affected areas. The sky above them shimmered as newly activated energy shields enveloped the planet, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. In the underwater facility, Commander Morrison watched in awe as the stasis pod before him hummed to life. The precursor within stirred, its silver eyes fluttering open for the first time in millennia. "Welcome back," Morrison said, his voice barely above a whisper. The precursor sat up slowly, its gaze sweeping the room before settling on Morrison. "I am Zalax," it spoke, its voice a melodious whisper. "How long have I slumbered?" Before Morrison could respond, Zalax's eyes widened. It reached out, interfacing with the facility's systems through mere touch. "The failsafe. It's been activated," Zalax murmured, ancient knowledge flooding back. In orbit, the assembled fleets watched in stunned silence as the precursor ship disengaged its tractor beam. The archiver vessels, now free, maintained their positions, weapons powered down. Aboard the Galileo, Greg's hologram expanded, filling the conference room with a three-dimensional display of Zephyria's new capabilities. "The planet is now mobile," he explained, gesturing to the massive engines. "Its defenses are fully operational, and hidden precursor structures are emerging as we speak." The delegates watched in a mixture of awe and trepidation as the holographic display showed cities rising from the oceans and facilities activating in remote areas. The planet's geography shifted before their eyes, new land masses forming and old ones changing shape. "This is unprecedented," Prime Minister Zorn breathed, his eyes wide. Greg nodded solemnly. "Indeed, but it's only the beginning. I propose we form a collaborative council with representatives from all our factions, humans, pack lead, precursors, and archivers alike." The room erupted in a flurry of whispers and exclamations. Captain Chen raised her hand, silencing the delegates. "Greg, what exactly are you suggesting?" "A new era of cooperation," Greg replied, his voice firm. "Zephyria will serve as a neutral hub for scientific research and diplomatic relations. Its mobility and the wormhole network we've established make it the ideal center for galactic advancement." The archiver representative leaned forward, its multifaceted eyes glinting with interest. "And our role in this council?" Greg turned to face the archiver. "Your knowledge is invaluable. We need your expertise to ensure the responsible distribution and development of precursor technology." As discussions intensified, Dr. Alara Voss's voice came through the comm system. "Captain Chen, we've done it. We've established a stable, large-scale wormhole connection to the distant precursor outpost." The news sent a ripple of excitement through the conference room. Greg's hologram smiled, the expression somehow both human and alien. "This is the future we can build together," he said, gesturing to the holographic display of Zephyria. "A future of exploration, advancement, and unity." On the planet's surface, Sarah and Grohl had finally stabilized their section of the anti-gravity field. They watched in amazement as a previously hidden precursor structure rose from the ground nearby, its sleek architecture gleaming in the light of the energy shields above. "Sarah," Grohl said, his voice filled with wonder, "I believe we are witnessing the birth of a new age." As the summit aboard the Galileo prepared to vote on Greg's proposal, Zephyria completed its first controlled spatial movement. The planet glided gracefully through space, repositioning itself within the star system. The sight of a world in motion, shielded by shimmering energy fields and overflowing with advanced technology, served as a powerful symbol of the potential that lay before them. In the underwater facility, Azalex worked feverishly at the central control systems, with Commander Morrison's team watching in fascination. "There," the precursor scientist announced, activating a holographic display. "I've initiated a planet-wide diagnostic. Now we can see Zephyria's full capabilities." The display revealed a complex network of subterranean transportation tubes crisscrossing the planet. Morrison's eyes widened as he realized the implications. "This could solve our evacuation and resource distribution challenges," he said, already planning how to utilize this new discovery. As the delegates on the Galileo prepared to cast their votes, the fate of multiple civilizations hung in the balance. The galaxy stood on the precipice of a new era, with Zephyria at its center. The transformed planet, once a quiet outpost, now held the key to a future of unprecedented cooperation and advancement. Technological advancement held the promise of a brighter future for all species involved. As the final votes were tallied, a palpable sense of excitement filled the conference room aboard the HFY Galileo. Captain Chen stood at the head of the table, her voice clear and authoritative as she announced the results. "The proposal has passed with an overwhelming majority," she declared. "The Galactic Cooperative Council is hereby established, with Zephyria as our neutral hub for research and diplomacy." A chorus of cheers and approving murmurs erupted from the delegates. Greg's holographic form smiled, the expression both triumphant and humbled by the weight of responsibility now placed upon him. "Thank you all for your trust," he said. "Now let's get to work." The following days saw a flurry of activity both on Zephyria's surface and in orbit. The HSS Galileo, once a simple cargo vessel, now buzzed with construction crews. Human and Packlet engineers worked side by side, guided by newly awakened precursors, to expand the ship's modular structure. Lieutenant Reyes oversaw the installation of a new diplomatic wing, her keen eye ensuring every detail met the exacting standards of interspecies comfort. "Make sure those atmospheric regulators are properly calibrated," she instructed a team of technicians. We can't have our archiver friends suffocating during negotiations. On the planet below, Sarah, Takata, and Grohl found themselves leading an expedition through the newly revealed subterranean transportation network. They boarded a sleek pod, its interior pulsing with soft blue light. "Ready?" Sarah asked, her hand hovering over the activation panel. Grohl nodded, his three-fingered hand gripping the safety harness. "As I'll ever be." With a whoosh, the pod shot forward, whisking them through a labyrinth of tunnels at breathtaking speed. The walls blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors as they passed through different geological layers. "Incredible," Sarah breathed, her eyes glued to the pod's sensor readouts. "We've covered half the planet in minutes." Their journey ended at a massive underground cavern, where a team of scientists from various species had already set up a makeshift research station. Holographic displays flickered to life, showcasing the wealth of precursor technology discovered in the surrounding area. Meanwhile, aboard the expanded HSS Galileo, Dr. Chen conducted a series of tests on Greg Coleman. Greg sat patiently as a swarm of medical drones scanned his body, their soft hums filling the air. "How are you feeling, Greg?" Dr. Chen asked, her eyes darting between his vital signs and the neural activity display. Greg closed his eyes, his consciousness expanding to interface with the ship's systems. "Like I'm everywhere and nowhere at once," he replied. "The amount of information, it's overwhelming, but exhilarating." Dr. Chen nodded, making notes on her datapad. "Your neural plasticity is off the charts. You're processing data at rates we've never seen before in a human brain." In orbit, the Archiver fleet began the monumental task of data transfer. Streams of light pulsed between their ships and the newly established servers on Zephyria and the Galileo. Captain Chen watched from the bridge, her face bathed in the ethereal glow of the data transfer. "How long until the transfer is complete?" she asked her communications officer. "At current rates, approximately 72 hours, Captain," came the reply. "The amount of information is staggering." As the day wore on, Dr. Alara Voss stood before a shimmering portal, the culmination of her life's work. The stable wormhole pulsed with energy, its event horizon a swirling mass of light and color. "Sending through the probe now," she announced to her team. Seconds later, a cheer erupted as data began streaming back from a distant star system. "It worked! We've established a stable connection to the precursor outpost." The celebration was short-lived, however. Alarms blared across the Galileo and Zephyria's surface. Greg's holographic form materialized on the bridge, his expression grave. "Long-range sensors have detected an approaching fleet," he announced. "Origin unknown, but they're moving fast." Captain Chen's posture stiffened. "How long until they reach us?" "At their current speed, less than 48 hours, Greg replied. Chen nodded, her mind already racing through potential scenarios. "Alert the Council. We need to convene immediately." As the newly formed Galactic Cooperative Council gathered for an emergency session, tension filled the air. The approaching fleet loomed like a shadow over their fledgling alliance, a test of their grit and unity in the face of the unknown. Greg's holographic form expanded, filling the room with a three-dimensional display of the incoming ships. "I've initiated a deep scan," he began, his voice resonating with the power of Zephyria's systems. "The results are intriguing." The delegates leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the holographic ships. The vessels were sleek and angular, their design unmistakably reminiscent of precursor technology, yet subtly different. "These ships appear to be of precursor origin," Greg continued, "but they've been extensively modified. Someone else has been using them, perhaps for a very long time." Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. The Archiver delegates' multifaceted eyes glinted with curiosity. "In all our centuries of observation, we've never encountered such vessels," it said. "This is unprecedented." Captain Chen stood, her voice cutting through the growing chatter. "We need to decide on a course of action, and quickly. Do we attempt communication, prepare our defenses, or take more preemptive measures?" The room erupted into debate, each faction arguing for their preferred approach. As discussions grew heated, the massive energy shield enveloping Zephyria and the surrounding space hummed to life, casting an eerie glow over the assembled ships. On the planet's surface, Sarah and Grohl's team had just uncovered a chamber housing advanced sensor technology. As they activated the system, a flood of data poured in, revealing the true extent of the approaching fleet's capabilities. Sarah's eyes widened as she scanned the readouts. "We need to contact the Council immediately," she said, her voice urgent. "These ships, they're armed to the teeth. Whatever they are, they're ready for a fight." As the information reached the Council chamber, the atmosphere grew even more tense. The delegates fell silent, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily upon them. Greg's holographic form flickered, his expression a mix of concern and tenacity. "We have less than 24 hours before they enter our space," he announced. "Whatever we decide, we must do it soon." Captain Chen nodded, her gaze sweeping across the assembled representatives. "The future of our alliance, perhaps of the entire galaxy, may well depend on what we do next," she said. "Let's hope we choose wisely." As the Council prepared to make their crucial decision, Zephyria's ancient systems thrummed with power, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The approaching fleet drew ever closer, its intentions unknown, while the newly formed galactic order stood on the brink of its first true test. As the Council prepared to make their crucial decision, Greg's holographic form suddenly flickered with increased intensity. His eyes darted back and forth, processing information at an inhuman speed. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "I've detected a pattern in the fleet's movement. It's not consistent with aggressive intent." Captain Chen leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Explain." Greg's form expanded, filling the room with a detailed holographic representation of the approaching fleet's trajectory. Their course adjustments, the spacing between ships, it's more indicative of a cautious approach than an attack formation. The revelation sent a ripple through the assembled delegates. Captain Chen nodded, her mind already shifting gears. "This changes things. We need to initiate contact." Within minutes, the Council had formulated a plan. The HSS Galileo's communication array hummed to life, broadcasting a carefully crafted message across multiple channels. Human, pack lead, and newly deciphered precursor protocols intertwined in a complex dance of data. "This is Captain Elena Chen of the Galactic Cooperative Council," the message began. "We come in peace and extend an invitation for dialogue. Our alliance represents a new era of cooperation and advancement. We welcome you to join us in shaping the future of our galaxy." As the transmission cut off, the bridge of the Galileo fell silent. Captain Chen turned to her communications officer. "Now we wait." On Zephyria's surface, Sarah and Grohl's team had just made a breakthrough of their own. They stood in awe before a massive holographic display, its light casting long shadows in the cavernous precursor facility. "It's incredible," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the wealth of information before her. "This entire complex is dedicated to diplomatic relations and first contact scenarios." Grohl nodded, his three-fingered hand gesturing at the scrolling data. "Look at this, Sarah. Cultural databases for thousands of species, most of which we've never encountered." Commander Morrison's voice crackled over their comms. "We need to get this information to the Council immediately. It could be crucial in communicating with the approaching fleet." As Sarah and Grohl worked to establish a direct link between the facility and the Galileo, Dr. Alara Voss and her team raced against time to integrate the new diplomatic technology with Zephyria's systems. "Careful with those connections," Voss instructed, her hands flying over a holographic interface. "We can't afford any data corruption." The hours ticked by, tension mounting as they awaited a response from the unknown fleet. Greg's holographic form materialized on the Galileo's bridge, his expression intense. "We're receiving a transmission," he announced. "It's complex, a series of data bursts and energy signatures, unlike anything in our records." Captain Chen straightened in her chair. "Can you decipher it?" Greg's form flickered as he processed the incoming data. "I'm working on it. The patterns are intricate, but I'm starting to see correlations with known communication protocols." As Greg worked, Prime Minister Zorn's image appeared on a nearby screen. "Captain Chen, we're activating Zephyria's defensive capabilities as a precaution." Chen nodded her approval, watching as a network of orbital platforms emerged from hidden locations across the planet's surface. The platforms took up strategic positions, their precursor technology providing a significant boost to the Allied forces' capabilities. The archiver representative stepped forward, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the light of the holographic displays. We may be able to assist in decoding the transmission. Our database contains records spanning millennia. Perhaps there are patterns we can cross-reference. Captain Chen nodded. Do it. A massive data transfer began, information flowing between the archiver's ships and Zephyria's central processing hub. Greg's holographic form pulsed with increased intensity as he integrated the new data into his analysis. Suddenly, Greg's eyes widened. I've got it, he announced. The fleet, they're from a sector of the galaxy where precursor influence was thought to have never reached. They're curious about the sudden reactivation of precursor technology in this sector, but also cautious. Captain Chen leaned forward, her mind racing. Prepare a response. We need to reassure them of our peaceful intentions and provide information about our alliance and Zephyria's reactivation. As the Council worked to craft their message, Zephyria's wormhole network suddenly flared with activity. New connections formed spontaneously, linking the planet to previously undiscovered precursor outposts across the galaxy. Dr. Voss's voice came through the comm system, excitement evident in her tone. Captain, the network is expanding exponentially. We're seeing new pathways to regions of space we've never explored before. Captain Chen nodded, her expression a mix of anticipation and concern. This opens up incredible opportunities for exploration, but it also exposes us to potential new threats. We'll need to proceed carefully. With the response prepared, Captain Chen gave the order to transmit. The message streamed out from the Galileo, carrying with it the hopes of the newly formed alliance. As they waited for a reply, the Allied fleet held its position, a protective formation around Zephyria. The unknown ships maintained their distance, their intentions still unclear. On the bridge of the Galileo, Captain Chen stood at the viewport, her gaze fixed on the distant fleet. Whatever happens next, she said quietly, it will shape the future of our galaxy for generations to come. Come. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of countless possibilities. As if in response to her statement, a burst of activity erupted across the Galileo's communication systems. Greg's holographic form flickered intensely, his eyes widening as he processed the incoming data. Captain, he announced, his voice cutting through the tension, we've received a response from the unknown fleet. Chen turned sharply, her full attention now on Greg. What does it say? Greg's form expanded, projecting a complex series of data streams and energy signatures. It's intricate, but I've managed to decipher the core message. They're expressing a willingness to send a diplomatic delegation to the Galileo for face-to-face negotiations. A collective exhale rippled through the bridge crew. Chen nodded, her mind already racing ahead. Understood. Alert the Council and begin preparations immediately. We need to be ready to receive our guests. As the news spread, the Galileo became a hive of activity. Engineering teams swarmed through the newly expanded diplomatic quarters, installing advanced holographic communication systems and reconfigurable environmental controls. Security officers meticulously went over every detail of the non-lethal containment, fields, and emergency lockdown protocols. Chen stood in the center of it all, overseeing the controlled chaos with a keen eye. She tapped her communication badge, opening a channel to the planet's surface. Dr. Voss, what's the status of the wormhole network? Ilara's voice came through, tinged with excitement. The spontaneous connections have stabilized, Captain. We're preparing unmanned probes to gather preliminary data on the new locations. The possibilities are staggering. Good work, Chen replied. Keep me updated on any significant findings. As she closed the channel, Chen's gaze drifted to the viewport, where Zephyria's transformed landscape stretched out before her. The planet pulsed with newfound energy, its reactivated precursor systems intertwining with the work of the allied species. On the surface, Commander Morrison's team had made significant progress. Using the subterranean transportation network, they had established a series of forward operating bases near major precursor installations. These bases buzzed with activity, serving as hubs for ongoing research and exploration efforts. Back on the Galileo, the archiver representatives worked tirelessly alongside human and Pakled scientists, integrating their vast database with Zephyria's central processing hub. The fusion of knowledge led to breakthroughs in energy production and material science, with the first practical application being more efficient shields for the Allied fleet's ships. As the hours ticked by, tension mounted. The diplomatic delegation's ship entered the Zephyrian system, its design a fascinating blend of precursor technology and unknown modifications. Long-range scanners provided detailed information, revealing markings and symbols unlike any in the archiver database. Chen stood on the bridge, watching as the Galileo extended its docking arms to receive the delegation's ship. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "This is it," she said to her crew. "Whatever happens next will shape the course of galactic history." As the vessels connected, the Galactic Cooperative Council assembled in the main conference room. Greg Coleman, his physical form now stabilized but still bearing the marks of his transformation, took his place among the council members. His unique position as both a human and a conduit for precursor knowledge made him an invaluable asset in the upcoming negotiations. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as they awaited the arrival of the unknown delegation. But just as the airlock began to cycle, Zephyria's long-range sensors lit up with activity. Greg's eyes widened, his form flickering intensely. "Captain, we're detecting a massive energy signature at the edge of the system. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before." Chen's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "On screen!" The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a colossal structure materializing at the system's edge. Its size defied comprehension, dwarfing even Zephyria itself. "Initial analysis suggests it's another precursor construct," Greg reported, his voice filled with awe. "Possibly a megastructure of immense proportions." Chen's mind raced, weighing the implications of this new development against the imminent arrival of the diplomatic delegation. She turned to face the airlock, her posture straight and resolute. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation, "it seems our negotiations just became a lot more interesting." As the airlock hissed open, revealing the silhouettes of the unknown delegation, the megastructure loomed in the distance, a silent testament to the vast mysteries that still awaited them in the depths of space. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, poised on the edge of a new era of discovery and cooperation, or conflict. The airlock hissed open, revealing the silhouettes of the unknown delegation. As they stepped into the light, Captain Chen's eyes widened, taking in their diverse forms. The delegation consisted of 5 individuals, each unique in appearance and bearing. Their leader, a tall, slender being with iridescent scales and 4 arms, stepped forward. "I am Zarnath, Chief Envoy of the Zarn Collective," the being announced, its voice a melodious blend of tones. "We come seeking understanding and cooperation." Chen nodded, her posture relaxed but alert. "Welcome aboard the HSS Galileo. I'm Captain Elena Chen of the Galactic Cooperative Council. We're honored to receive you." As Chen began to guide the delegation towards the main conference room, Greg's holographic form flickered intensely. His eyes darted back and forth, processing a flood of new information. "Captain," he interrupted, his voice urgent, "we have a situation." Chen turned, her brow furrowing. "Report." Greg's form expanded, projecting a holographic display of the Zephyrian system. At its edge, a massive structure materialized, dwarfing even Zephyria itself. "An unknown construct has appeared at the system's edge," Greg explained. "Initial scans suggest it's of precursor origin, possibly a megastructure of immense proportions." The Zarn delegation exchanged glances, their body language tense. Zarnath stepped forward, eyes fixed on the holographic display. "A precursor nexus node," Zarnath breathed, awe and concern mingling in their voice. "We've encountered similar structures before, but never one of this magnitude." Chen's mind raced, weighing the implications of this new development. She tapped her communication badge, opening a channel to the bridge. "Commander Reyes, assemble a task force immediately. We need eyes on that structure." "Aye, Captain," came the swift reply. Turning back to the delegation, Chen gestured towards the conference room. "It seems our discussions have taken on a new urgency. Shall we? As they entered the room, Chen noticed the subtle hum of the non-lethal containment fields activating. A necessary precaution, but one she hoped wouldn't be needed. The council members were already seated, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Greg's holographic form took its place at the table, his eyes still darting as he processed data from Zephyria's systems. As the meeting began, Chen's communication badge chirped. "Captain, this is Commander Morrison. We've made a discovery in the underwater facility that you need to see." Chen excused herself momentarily, stepping to the side of the room. "Go ahead, Commander." Morrison's voice came through, excitement evident. "We've uncovered a hidden chamber containing precursor artifacts. One of them bears a striking resemblance to the megastructure we've detected." Chen's eyes widened. "Understood. Have Zalax begin analysis immediately. We need to know if there's a connection." Returning to the table, Chen found the discussion in full swing. The Zarn representatives were explaining their history with precursor technology, detailing how they had discovered and repurposed it centuries ago in a distant part of the galaxy. Suddenly, Greg's form flickered violently. His eyes snapped open, filled with a mixture of wonder and alarm. "Captain," he said, his voice strained, "Zephyria's core temperature is rising. Dormant systems are coming online across the planet." Chen leaned forward, her voice steady despite the tension. "Ilara, what's happening down there?" Dr. Voss's voice came through, breathless with exertion. "We're seeing unprecedented levels of activity, Captain. It's as if the entire planet is waking up." As if on cue, alarms blared throughout the ship. Greg's form expanded again, displaying a real-time view of the system. The megastructure was on the move, accelerating towards Zephyria at an impossible speed. The Zarn delegation rose to their feet, bodies tense. Zarnath spoke, their voice filled with urgency. "Captain, we've seen this before. The Nexus node is preparing to interface with your precursor world. The consequences could be unimaginable." Greg's eyes widened further, his form pulsing with energy. "The dormant subroutine in Zephyria's core? It's designed for this exact scenario. The planet is aligning its systems, preparing for connection." Chen stood, her mind racing through options. She turned to the council members, her voice firm and decisive. "We need to act now. Our next steps will determine not just the future of our alliance, but potentially the fate of the entire galaxy." As she spoke, the Nexus node drew ever closer, its massive form now visible through the ship's viewports. Zephyria pulsed with newfound energy, its reactivated systems singing in harmony with the approaching construct. The HSS Curiosity, leading the hastily assembled task force, pushed forward despite the intensifying interference. Its advanced sensors, born from the fusion of precursor and archiver technology, probed the Nexus node's defenses. On the Galileo's bridge, data streamed in from multiple sources. The task force's scans, Zephyria's awakening systems, and the frantic reports from research teams planetside. The ship hummed with tension as crew members worked to process the flood of information. Chen turned to Greg, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "What are our options?" Greg's form flickered as he ran countless simulations in microseconds. "We have 3 primary choices, Captain. We can attempt to halt the Nexus node's approach, try to control the interface between it and Zephyria, or we can let events unfold and hope for the best." The council chamber fell silent as the weight of the decision settled upon them. The fate of not just their alliance, but potentially the entire known universe, hung in the balance. Chen's gaze swept across the room, taking in the determined faces of her crew, the wary expressions of the Zarn delegation, and the pulsing form of Greg Coleman. Beyond the viewports, Zephyria gleamed with awakened power, while the Nexus node loomed ever larger. The moment of truth had arrived. Whatever they decided next would shape the course of galactic history. History. The tension in the room was palpable as all eyes turned to Captain Chen, awaiting her decision. Before Chen could speak, alarms blared throughout the ship. Lieutenant Reza's voice came over the comm system, urgent and clear. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations from Zephyria. The planet's systems are activating at an unprecedented rate." Chen's expression hardened as she made her decision. "Initiate emergency protocols. Begin immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel to Zephyria's surface. As the crew sprang into action, Greg's holographic form expanded, filling the room with a three-dimensional display of Zephyria. The planet's surface was transforming before their eyes, vast energy conduits emerging from the ground and forming an intricate network across its face. "The planet is preparing for the connection," Greg explained, his voice resonating with a mix of awe and trepidation. "I'm detecting power surges from the core, channeling through these newly revealed conduits to receptor nodes across the surface." Chen tapped her comm badge. "Commander Morrison, status report." Morrison's voice crackled through, the sound of machinery whirring in the background. "We've secured the underwater facility, Captain. The artifact resembling the Nexus node has been transported to our fortified research center. Xalax and a joint team of scientists are analyzing it as we speak." "Good work," Chen replied. "Keep that artifact secure at all costs." Turning to the Zarn delegation, Chen's gaze met Zarnath's multifaceted eyes. "Your experience with these structures could be invaluable. Would you be willing to assist our efforts?" Zarnath nodded, their iridescent scales shimmering. "Of course, Captain. We'll detach our ship and take up a defensive position alongside your fleet. Our sensors are at your disposal." As the Zarn ship disengaged from the Galileo, the massive form of the Nexus node became visible through the viewports. Its sheer size defied comprehension, dwarfing even Zephyria as it approached. Greg's form flickered intensely. "Captain, I'm detecting a surge of data flowing through Zephyria's systems. It appears to be coming from the Nexus node itself." Dr. Alara Voss's voice joined the conversation, her excitement palpable even through the comm system. "Confirmed, Captain. We're receiving complex schematics and activation protocols. This data could be crucial in managing the connection." Chen's mind raced, processing the flood of information. "Greg, can you interface with these new protocols?" Greg nodded, his form pulsing with energy. "Already on it, Captain. I'm integrating the data into Zephyria's core systems now." Outside, the scene continued to evolve. Zephyria's orbital defense platforms repositioned themselves, forming a symmetrical pattern around the planet. Beams of energy shot out from the platforms, creating a web-like structure of interconnected force fields. "The planet's defenses are activating," Lieutenant Riza reported. "They seem to be preparing to channel and distribute the energy from the Nexus node." Chen watched as the Nexus node entered Zephyria's upper atmosphere, its massive form now dominating the sky. The planet's surface began to shift and reconfigure, revealing hidden structures and machinery that had lain dormant for eons. Greg's voice cut through the chaos, filled with urgency. "Captain, the dormant subroutine in Zephyria's core has activated. It's initiating a complex sequence of operations throughout the planet's infrastructure." As the gap between the Nexus node and Zephyria closed, the energy emanating from both entities intensified. The ship's sensors struggled to keep up with the rapidly changing data. "All hands, brace for impact," Chen called out, gripping the arms of her chair as the Galileo shuddered under the strain of the immense energies surrounding them. The Nexus node's surface began to morph, extending tendrils of energy that reached out towards Zephyria. The planet responded in kind, its newly awakened systems resonating with the ancient megastructure. In the fortified research center on Zephyria's surface, Xalax and his team worked feverishly to decipher the artifact's secrets. The device pulsed with an inner light, its rhythms matching the approaching Nexus node. "We're on the verge of a breakthrough," Xalax's voice came through, tight with concentration. "The artifact is responding to the Nexus node's proximity. It's like a key, Captain, a key to something monumental." As the first tendrils of energy from the Nexus node made contact with Zephyria's atmosphere, a blinding light engulfed the planet. The Galileo's view screens automatically dimmed to protect the crew's vision. Greg's form expanded once more, his consciousness now fully integrated with Zephyria's core. "It's happening, Captain. The connection is being established. I can feel the planet's systems aligning with the Nexus node. The amount of data, it's beyond anything we've ever encountered." The ship's sensors overloaded, unable to process the sheer magnitude of energy being exchanged between Zephyria and the Nexus node. For a moment, all communication ceased, leaving the crew of the Galileo in eerie silence. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The view screens cleared, revealing a transformed Zephyria. The planet glowed with newfound energy, its surface a tapestry of activated precursor technology. Chen leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Status report? What just happened?" Before anyone could respond, a new signal cut through the silence. It originated from the heart of the Nexus node, a message encoded in ancient precursor language. Greg's eyes widened as he processed the transmission. "Captain," he said, his voice filled with wonder, I think we've just been invited inside to witness something extraordinary." As the words left Greg's holographic lips, the Nexus node made contact with Zephyria's upper atmosphere. A blinding flash of energy engulfed the planet, forcing the crew of the Galileo to shield their eyes. The ship's view screens automatically dimmed to protect against the intense light. Through the momentary blindness, Lieutenant Reza's voice rang out, "Captain, the orbital defense platforms are activating." As vision returned, the crew witnessed a breathtaking sight. The defense platforms had channeled the energy surge, creating a dazzling web of light that encased the entire world. The intricate lattice pulsed with power, each node a nexus of swirling energy. Greg's holographic form flickered violently, his expression a mix of awe and concentration. The dormant subroutine. It's fully activating. I can feel it. The information. It's overwhelming. Captain Chen leaned forward, her squeezing hard as she gripped the arms of her chair. "Greg, what's happening?" Greg's eyes widened, his form expanding to fill the room with a holographic representation of Zephyria and the Nexus node. "I understand now, Captain. Zephyria, the Nexus node, they're part of something far greater than we ever imagined. A vast, galaxy-spanning network designed by the precursors to preserve and share knowledge across eons." As Greg spoke, the planet's surface began a dramatic reconfiguration. Massive structures rose from the depths of the oceans, their emergence sending tsunamis crashing against distant shores. Mountains split apart, revealing hidden megastructures that had lain dormant for millennia. "These structures," Greg explained, his voice filled with wonder, "they're colossal towers, designed to connect directly with the Nexus node." The crew watched in awe as the towers reached into the upper atmosphere, their tips glowing with concentrated energy. As they made contact with the descending node, a shockwave of power pulsed through the planet. Alarms blared throughout the ship as sensors struggled to keep up with the rapidly changing data. "Captain," Lieutenant Reza reported, "I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations across the planet's surface. The subterranean transportation network is activating on a global scale." Chen tapped her comm badge. "Zalax, are you seeing this?" Zalax's voice came through, tight with concentration. "Affirmative, Captain. The artifact we discovered is reacting to the planetary changes. It appears to be a control interface for this transformation." As Zalax spoke, Zephyria itself began to transform. The planet's entire structure altered, accommodating the influx of power and data from the Nexus node. The Galileo's sensors detected an unprecedented surge of information flowing through newly formed wormhole connections, linking Zephyria to thousands of locations across the galaxy. Greg's holographic form pulsed with each new wave of data. "Captain, the wormhole network, it's expanding exponentially. We're receiving data from countless civilizations, some long extinct, others we've never encountered." On the planet's surface, the populace watched in amazement as the sky itself changed. The atmosphere shimmered with ribbons of light, forming intricate patterns that represented the flow of information between Zephyria and the wider galaxy. "The cocoon!" Greg suddenly exclaimed, his holographic form flickering intensely. It's changing me. I can feel my physical body transforming." Before Chen could respond, Greg's hologram disappeared, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Moments later, it reappeared, but Greg's form had changed. He now appeared as a being that bridged the gap between human and precursor, his new body capable of interfacing directly with Zephyria's systems. I am the Guardian now, Greg said, his voice resonating with newfound power. Zephyria has become a galactic hub, a central node in the Precursor's network of knowledge sharing. We stand at the dawn of a new era, Captain. As Greg spoke, the Galileo's communication systems lit up with incoming transmissions. Ships from across the galaxy were arriving through the newly established wormhole network, drawn by the call of ancient knowledge and the promise of a new age of cooperation. Chen straightened in her chair, her expression a mix of awe and dedication. Greg, what happens now? Greg's new form smiled, a gesture both familiar and alien. Now, Captain, we invite the galaxy to join us. The Galactic Cooperative Council must convene. It's time to forge the Zephyrian Accord and usher in an age of unprecedented discovery and understanding. As Chen began issuing orders to prepare for the incoming delegations, Greg turned his attention to the streams of data flowing through Zephyria's newly awakened systems. The planet hummed with potential, ready to serve as the cornerstone of a new galactic civilization. The crew of the Galileo, along with the inhabitants of Zephyria, stood on the brink of a transformation that would reshape the very fabric of galactic society. As ships from thousands of worlds began to arrive, the true scope of their discovery was only beginning to unfold.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.